evening to all of you across the world, since we have a very international viewership, don't we, Philip?
Yeah, we do at this point. Um,
Yeah,
is my live working? I have to go check.
yeah, right. Is my live working? Are we actually communicating with real humans? I believe we might be. If you're out there in the live chat, please drop us a note to let us know that we are, in fact, reaching humans beyond ourselves, technology being what it is. Yeah,
Quickly. I am now anyway. I'm live over on my channel, so that's the main thing. I just
fantastic.
I just came back from Taiwan, so I literally just plugged and connected all this stuff up now. So I'm like doing this in the background right
Yeah,
now.
yeah. We just got in from Seoul at
Oh,
12:30 this morning. So we were doing the
there's
same. It's like, oh, the Ethernet cable, where did that go? Headphones. Oh wait, I took them to Seoul. Are they charged? Yeah, it was there was a bunch of skippering around. Yeah,
mm,
fantastic. Okay. Isla is here, although I can't. Oh, there. Okay. Isla, welcome. Thank you for joining us this morning. So yeah, I had an exciting time in Seoul
oh,
yesterday.
so for
Spring is here. Yeah, spring is here,
oh,
so that's nice. But yesterday I actually had an appointment to visit the Korean National Folk Museum and actually examine in person with my eyes and hands
mm,
500-year-old women's undergarments.
Jesus, how
Yeah.
is it? This has been a part of your massive argument for quite some time because every once in a while, somebody comes into our streams and stuff and starts arguing that
Yeah.
medieval people didn't wear underwear, and you're
Oh
just
God.
suddenly grinding your teeth and have to
Yeah.
correct them. So you found evidence from the Asian side that they did in
Well, I
fact
mean,
have
these are.
undergarments.
I mean, yeah. So under. We have to clarify our terms, right? Like, what is underwear?
Mm,
Everyone uses that term to mean different things. Hypothetically, the word really just means anything that's worn against your skin, the layers that
mm,
are between your actually nice clothes and you.
yeah, yeah,
Which can be an undershirt, it could be underpants, that could be socks, even count as underwear. Honestly,
yeah.
that could be any kind of support garment for women, right? So there's a lot of different items that fall under the heading of underwear,
Mm,
and I think that might be part of the confusion in some cases. But
mm,
Asian Korean women absolutely, since at least the Shilla dynasty, have been wearing what we would call underpants, right?
mm,
The and the crazy thing is several different kinds of them. So yeah, I have examined 500-year-old women's underpants from Korea, and they are not what anyone expects them to be. They're big, they're full, they're long. They not only are they underpants, they provide volume to the overskirts. They prevent chafing between the thighs. And one of the weirdest arguments for why women historically have not worn underpants, in my
mm,
most arrogant Telecaster tones, one of the arguments for this has been, well, it is so inconvenient to relieve oneself if one is wearing long skirts. And so women just didn't wear underpants to make it easy to relieve themselves. And I'm like, but men have also historically worn long skirts in many different cultures, right? Japan,
mm,
Asia or Korea, China, Europe. There have been periods of
mm,
fashion where men were wearing robes and multiple layers that went to the ground, and yet men are also
mm.
wearing underpants. So don't give me that bullshit of it's just too inconvenient to go to relieve yourself with skirts if you're wearing underpants. Nonsense.
Yeah,
Nonsense.
of course it is. Because it's part of hygiene. Like I'm thinking to myself, like, do not people think about the hygiene level there? Because like it's not the most cleanest area. So to try to get that then spewing over everything else is kind of a bit much, especially when you're starting to get older as well. Like first thing, when you're an early child, and then when you start to get older and you don't have the same control over your hygiene that you did when you're in your 20s and stuff. I think underwear is going to come quite in handy
Yeah.
for those later stages in life for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And
The comment.
oh, yeah, go
Go
ahead.
on.
What do the comments have to say?
Oh, I was just going to move on a wee bit because Jim pointed to something else you were bitching about early on just before we came live. So I'll move the conversation over to that once
Yep.
you've finished your point there.
No, no, that's it's all good. That's it. people wear underwear. The convenience is not a factor. Hygiene is very important, and humans have always cared about hygiene. So yeah,
Mm.
underpants for everyone.
Aye. Jim points out there technology is scary. Yeah, we're definitely very, very quickly trying to wipe ourselves out with the Terminator. It was announced this morning that there is even more improvements. We're no longer in AI anymore. A lot of the programs we're using have actually, as of last 24 hours, the high tech companies have announced that we're no longer in the period of AI. We've gone above it, where AI now have you can't call it. It's not considered AI anymore. It's too intelligent to refer to
Hmm.
itself as AI in the last 24 hours. So we've kind of gotten into this really weird, as of 2025, we've kind of gone into this weird period. And I remember the movie Judgment Day. What was it? The Terminator movies,
Yeah,
based on these years, and now I'm like, oh, okay. So we've gotten
here
to
we
a point
are.
where the technology can now think, not just think for itself, but can now learn on the spot. So everything we're feeding it now learns and thinks for itself. So it's too intelligent to be referred to as AI as of this morning. Well, last 24 hours. And even Rachel has had problems with the technology because in the last 24 hours, it's stolen your work, hasn't it,
Yep.
Rachel? So
Yeah, I
you've
mean,
already had buttoned with it.
yeah, I mean, it's like I don't know if this creator who stole my videos. For those who don't know, there's this asshole creator called Timeless
Mm,
Fashion. The piece of shit is on Facebook and on TikTok, and I might start dropping some four-letter bombs here because I'm pretty pissed off.
mm,
They stole my hard, I mean, I go my getting dressed videos from the 15th century, into which I have invested hundreds of hours of research, creation, and scripting, and filming and editing, and they just screen captured them and just incorporated them into their own bloody video about medieval women's headgear compared to 19th century women's headgear.
mm,
Didn't ask me for permission, didn't credit me. Nothing. And not just me, like a whole bunch of other creators had their work stolen in this
mm.
garbage video that was put out. And
Right.
apparently, other creators have complained, historical clothing fashion creators have complained about this piece of shit before. And so, what I don't know is if it is an AI creator, if it's a bot, or if this
I
person
think
is
it's a
just
bot.
using AI, if the person or this account is just using AI to swipe things. I don't know.
Mm,
But that's the horrible dystopia that we now inhabit, right?
yeah. I do think it's a bot because if you click onto the page, it has Ads Pro on the top of it as its main. Because if it's a human being, it puts in personality, but it
Right.
wouldn't. Like it's called Timeless Fashion. It's meant to be about a fashion channel, and yet it's got AI ads all over it. In particular, from
Yeah.
Facebook, would you believe it or not? And Facebook and Google did announce that they were going to start creating a whole load of AI pages, which eventually would, kind of take our own work as well. It's kind
Yeah.
of really weird because I remember when the Communist Manifesto was created, and it talked about an era when all of our work would be taken by AI, and that we should prepare for a communist period in history. But strangely and weirdly, AI now is hunting for our work as well and trying to push us out of the realm as well. So humans are
Right.
completely being pushed left, right, and center. And now
Yep.
that this thing can think for itself, I don't know what the hell is going on in the next few hours or so. But yeah, it's a very weird dystopia we're now officially living in, which is stealing our not just stealing our work, as in taking the opportunities that we meant to be provided to us as humans, but now literally physically taking our work
Yep.
because these machines, they don't have empathy
Yep.
because people are trying to rush these things out so quickly. They don't have any form of empathy whatsoever. And in when we just had the AI itself, in every single scenario, the AI went out there and whacked the people that were put in charge because the AI was afraid that the programmers would delete
Yep.
them. Because of that fear and no form of empathy, they just whack in every single scenario. And now, because these companies want to make money, they're pushing. They don't care. They're sociopaths in their own regard. They're pushing through. And now you've got to a point where, as of this morning, they're not even considered AI anymore because they're too intelligent.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah. So, and the fact that they're just stealing our work because they have no understanding of what's wrong, what's right within society. They just say, oh, well, that's an opportunity to make more money. The person's feeling might be hurt, but I'm not breaking any laws. And even if I did, I'll just go under the radar anyway and delete my account afterwards because, the machine just does not care.
No, it does. It's like a child that it's like one of those super powerful children in those, horror movies that have all this amazing ability, but zero conscience, have been taught zero conscience and given zero code of ethics with which, how to apply their power. Isaac Asimov, came up with a series of rules basically that robots should have to follow, with which they should be programmed to prevent this exact sort of thing happening. But we can't learn from even science fiction. Forget learning from history. We can't even learn from science fiction that was written less than 100 years ago.
Oh,
So,
it's crazy. Yeah. Yeah. Like I was going to talk about the 80s and Japan and stuff, but we have our own famous movie, The Terminator, and
yeah.
it's crazy. Like, and the Terminator, everybody knows the Terminator, and we're not
Yep.
learning from this as quick as.
Skynet.
It's wild.
Skynet.
Yeah.
and
Isn't
all
that
of
what
these.
Elon Musk called one of his things?
This is the part that should scare everyone. All of the drones that are now being used in warfare, those are networked. Those aren't offline. Those aren't analog devices that have a button, like a big giant button that you press. No. Those are all handled from computer terminals, or even less. It wouldn't surprise me if they're now managing them from a bloody smartphone, right?
Yeah.
So it would be so easy for the machines, in quotes, to take all of that over, just like it does in the Terminator, and just obliterate us. But we can't learn, and it's all about greed. And the people who are making the money from this, it's not society at large. This isn't an economic movement that's going to lift all boats with the rising tide. No, it's just continuing to increase the gap between rich and poor. It's
crazy.
Stealing from people like us, who are the actual creators, the ones actually researching and recreating and sharing real knowledge. And ultimately, it's going to make about, 1,000 people in the whole planet super rich, and the rest of us are going to be left scrabbling for however long the machines let us continue to live, of course. So.
Oh yeah, it's getting out of hand at this point. Anyway, enough depressing work about them stealing our work first thing in the morning.
Right.
I literally just rolled out of bed and you're sending me that video. And I was like, okay, so it's stolen Rachel's work. And then there was Rachel all over it. And I was like, yes, the AI did steal Rachel's work. Oh, well.
It did. And it was funny. That's how I woke up. Like we got back at 12:30 a.m. So at 6:30, I wasn't exactly really ready to get out of bed. But there was a message from my friend Mason, King Henry Tudor's Royal Court, who said to me, he sent me this video and he said, "Hey, isn't this you in multiple places?" And lo and behold, within 5 seconds of watching the video, yes, it was me. And then it was me again. And then it was me again. And it was a video with all kinds of incorrect depictions and incorrect information about 15th century women's headdresses compared to, I think, 19th century women's headdresses.
It gave misinformation as well. What was the misinformation it gave?
Oh, just like they were showing all kinds of like garbage style, not authentic 15th century style headdresses, as though those were real representations of authentic ones, which they weren't at all. So they were putting my reconstruction of a 15th century headdress based on extant garments and expense accounts and extant textiles, right? They were comparing that to these people who were making garbage costume princess pointy hats, like they're the same thing. So it's insulting. Even it's not even just, they didn't just steal my work. They framed it with costume garbage, and then presented it like this is all the same, like this is all historical. And a channel that calls itself Timeless Fashions, pretending to be fashion history, So yeah, it was enraging on so many levels.
Oh, I can see. A lot of the comments right now are talking about your hair and your headdress. So could you,
Of
like,
course I am.
in particular for your hair, because everyone's just saying how gorgeous it is and how quickly you put it together and stuff. Just to confirm, this is how 15th century hair is supposed to be, and this is how
Yeah.
a 15th century headdress is supposed to be.
Yeah, so just to be clear, the headphones are not normally part of the ensemble.
Well,
um, so I've I've devised a way for the braids to hide the headphones in response to everyone's requests that
mm,
the headphones on top of the kerchief were too conspicuous, right?
mm,
So normally, no, you would not have giant plastic cups here, basically pushing out the braids. Not in this era, anyway. There's earlier in the late 14th or early 15th century, women are still wearing their hair in these kind of Princess Leia buns right on the sides of their head, but not by the end of the 15th century. But yes, the braids that I just did finished off with finger loop braiding as ties. That's the basic braid. This is a basic hairstyle from the later 15th century. And it's just a way to get the hair out of the way so that I can put on my kerchief like this. And this kerchief is very authentic. And this is a style of head covering that women of pretty much all social classes seem to wear at some point in
mm,
their day. Working women would wear this most of their day out and about when they were in the fields, when they were doing any kind of work that involved dust and dirt and grime. If they were working on the farm, churning butter, which everyone, of course, wants me to do. Everyone sees this and says, please churn butter for me. Damn, I need an OnlyFans page. And
well, no, since most of the money goes to that goes over to a certain place in the Middle
right,
East for bullets and stuff.
right.
So no, we won't be
No,
funding
we will
them.
not. Anyway, this kerchief for a noblewoman, an aristocrat, or a wealthy middle class woman, like a merchantess or a merchant's wife, or a wealthy craftswoman in and of her own right, a silk woman or a brewer with a successful business. Right, there were wealthy women who weren't just noble women in the 15th century.
Mm,
They would only wear this kind of ensemble. I call this the 15th century Lululemon. So, for
mm,
a noble woman like me to dress myself in this manner, I should not be going outside. This is not outside wear, which is, by the way, yes,
mm.
I judge you all who wear Lululemon outside beyond yoga. I do judge. Um, I should not be going outside in this ensemble. This is my private, relaxed, down dressed option, right? So we have depictions of women, of queens and noble women in their private chambers writing letters dressed like this, or
Mm,
reading a book dressed like this, or doing embroidery or some kind of craft dressed like this. They don't let themselves be seen like this. But yeah, this
mm,
is this is an authentic style. The brim can be left forward like this to better hide the earphones, or it can be turned back like this, which means the earphones aren't quite as well hidden. But yeah, this is an authentic look, and it's great because in the summer it keeps the sun off of my head, so it insulates me from the sun. But it's linen, so we have evaporative cooling. In the winter, despite it being linen, because I tested it all winter here in Korea, it actually keeps your head warm, but it breathes, so you're not
mm,
getting sweaty, right? It's just warm, but not warm and sweaty, which is,
mm,
linen is also antimicrobial, and so, it's good for hygiene, and it actually, like, any dirt or grime that kind of builds up around my face, because air is dirty even now, the linen actually kind
mm.
of kind of absorbs that from my hair and skin, so it helps me stay even cleaner. Yep.
I'm quickly scanning through recent debates and news because I literally just came in. Myself and Rachel came back in the last few hours and
Yep.
stuff, and I see bloody people arguing again about the Book of Kells not being Irish.
What? Why are
Um,
we? Why are we still talking about this?
this is the peak of ignorance, right? Because Britain, for quite some time, arguing, and they do this, by the way, over Irish fines, right? So during
Jesus.
the medieval period, borders are different to what they are now. And Iona and parts of Scotland was a part of the Enale territories, right? Just to be
Right.
clear about this. So when somebody turns around and says, oh, well, modern day Iona is in Scotland. So therefore, the Book of Kells, that's really Scottish. Hold your horses, people.
Oh my
So
God.
people are now arguing, right? Because that territory now is under Scotland, therefore it must be Scottish, which in itself is quite funny because I'm sure somebody in the comment section will turn around and go, well, actually, Scotland in the early
Well,
medieval
actually,
period, that wording is actually funny in itself because Scotland originally was Scot-E, and Scotty were pirates that originated from Ireland that eventually settled in Scotland. And therefore, Scotland, if you go into the linguistic side of things,
yeah,
actually means land of the Irish. Okay,
yeah.
so even
Rex
using the
Scotorum, right?
term,
Imperator Scotorum.
oh, so even using the term Scotland at the time is very, 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 very funny,
Yeah,
and it just goes to show the level of what was it, nationalist ignorance that has been chucked into this thing of is the Book of Kells Irish or not? Yes, it was created by the Irish monastic, and when the Vikings came in and attacked, they completed the book in Kells in Ireland,
yep,
okay, just to be official. So the Vikings come in, they attacked the islands that were occupied by the Irish. The men of Luckland and Norwegians come in, attack those regions, and the Irish pull back into Ireland. The men of Luckland follow them into Ireland,
yeah.
and then Mael Shocknall the First beats the Vikings around 836. Bye bye, Norwegians. And then we have a bunch of people then that settle into Ireland afterwards. So yes, the Book of Kells is Irish. Jesus,
It,
I'd like to. I still want to say a good argument if that's the case. Was an Anglo-Saxon or a Pictish man working on this? You know,
right.
go on.
I mean, it's this idea of nationalism gets a little frustrating anyway because
Mm,
people get so bound up in their modern national identities that they almost can't imagine a time when there wasn't such a thing, right?
yeah.
They can't imagine that in the era when the Book of Kells was created, there wasn't this thought of, Irish or Scottish for certain not, um,
Mm,
or English. There weren't even any English yet, really, at that point,
mm,
right? So it's very frustrating when people try to apply their modern sense of ethnic, cultural, national identity to something that
mm,
is almost 2,000 years old. The Book of Kells is so ancient. I mean, it's it's from a different world, a very different
mm,
world, geopolitically a very different world, to say nothing of culturally a different world. So
yeah.
it's funny how so many people throughout recent history, and usually for bad purposes, have tried to
Mm,
appropriate these cultural treasures and utilize them for their political narrative. And
mm,
I'm thinking about 80 years ago, Germany in particular. You know, um, they
yeah.
did some really ugly things with a bunch of medieval artifacts. You know what I'm saying?
Ugh, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
Absolutely disgusting for sure.
I have a question here. Are you in Korea? Yes. I am actually currently in Daegu, South Korea, and Philip is very close by, actually in Okinawa, which
Good no.
yeah,
Wow.
which is very far south. It's almost as far south as you can go and still be in technically in the country of Japan. So yeah, we are
The
here.
Book of Durham. What do I think of the Book of Durham? What am I thinking about the Book of Durham? Give us a second there, because I covered the Book of Durham back in 2015 when I was in University College of Cork. Give me a quick gawk. What am I supposed to think about the Book of Durham? uh, da- da- it's a gorgeous book with the illustrations and stuff. Um, I'm thinking no, like, what do you mean by what do I think of the Book of Durham? It's a nice book that was written in the 10th century, around
It's
960.
a beautiful illuminated
I
work.
don't know. I don't know. What am I
I mean,
supposed to?
so maybe the question is relevant to the
Um,
idea of national identity. Is it, is
yeah.
that something that we should consider purely Irish, or more of a fusion work representing the efforts of multiple cultures? As we have discovered in our own mutual explorations of medieval history, people traveled
Mm,
in the Middle Ages and they moved.
yes.
So we've got Irish
Well, you see,
monks in Austria,
yeah.
making notes in the margins of expensive books. So it's
Mm.
just as likely that the monks who were working on the Book of Kells weren't Irish at all, or Scottish, or from the Isles at all, because especially in
No.
early Christianity, there's a lot of movement within the monastic community of people going to far-flung places and either for pilgrimage or for a temporary sabbatical or to go and become part
Mm.
of that community. So,
Yeah.
it's just as likely.
No, I'm not denying that some of these manuscripts aren't kind of quote unquote multiculturalism to a certain degree. You could even say that. Like when it comes down to the Book of Kells, because the Book of Kells is solidly within the
Right.
Irish
Oh,
realm,
100%.
I would, yeah, I would find it very difficult to refer to it as, Scottish from a modern
Yeah,
perspective or
no,
English from a
no,
modern
no, no.
perspective. I have heard plenty of claims from British people turning around and saying, "Oh, well, it's got a influence from the Anglo Saxons, therefore it must be British." And I'm like, no, like there are influences there. There've been Anglo Saxon influences coming into Ireland since the seventh
Right.
century. But therefore, it's solidly like this. The majority of its own influence is still, what we would refer to as Celtic influences, Gaelic influences onto the book. But granted, at the same time, it has Byzantine Empire influences, Eastern Roman
Yeah.
influences. It has influences coming in from Italy.
Yeah.
Charlemagne's court has influences going into it. It has it's part of a wider world when it comes down to the Book of Kells. In fact, the majority of the medieval literature has influences coming from all
Yeah.
over, and it is it's solidly true. We have members of the Irish monastic church going as far as
Yeah.
Switzerland and setting up Irish monastic settlements in Switzerland and sending letters and various other ways to communicate with the papacy.
Right.
And there's no doubt that influences from the local regions would have made itself into Irish
Yep.
literature. But I still consider it Irish literature because it's made by the Irish
I mean,
clergy.
sure.
And it also has an influence of, what was it, Hiberno Latin. So the writing style that's in it is Hiberno Latin. So I would consider it a part of the Irish literature world as a whole. When it comes down to the Book of Durham, to answer your question, I have to look back into it because I haven't looked at the Book of Durham since 2015. So to answer your question, like, is the Book of Durham very Irish or very kind of Scottish or English, etc. I would assume it is, to be honest with you, and I personally would have to go through the book myself. Recently to give you an answer to how Irish from a scale of 1 to 10 is it.
Right.
But from my opinion, a majority of these books have Hiberno Latin in it. It's handled within the Irish monastic world, and the majority of it is
Right.
Irish. So I considered Irish literature at the time Irish. But on saying that, like, the reason why I would consider the book of Lindisfarne, for example, to be English is because, although a lot of Irish people did work on it, there's a lot of Anglo-Saxons that worked on the literature as well. And it's got a very kind of Anglo-Saxon style starting to go into it. A lot of people do consider the Book of Lindisfarne that's created in the 10th century to be between the Anglo-Saxon and, quote unquote, the Celtic world.
Right.
But, from a scale of 1 to 10, it's difficult because of how much influences are going into this book. But I wouldn't consider, I still, would put my foot down. I don't consider the Book of Kells to be British. It's Irish, And that's not just my opinion. That's the opinion of some top, the major academics and scholars of Ireland.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I, I, I haven't looked into, so there's a couple of ways, and you mentioned some good ones. Because someone asked me, how
Mm,
can you tell if chronicles are authentic or not, et cetera? And this kind of plays into that question. So how can we tell about the primary cultural influences in any of these medieval works? And you mentioned
mm,
some really good points. That one, we can look at the language. We can look at the
mm,
the syntax, the grammar, the style of language. And even if it's Latin, as you very rightly pointed out, Latin goes rogue in the Middle Ages.
yeah.
It basically, it's it's funny because there's these two weird parallel developments with Latin. On the one hand, you have the vernacular Romance languages that people use in their daily lives, which is, some people call that a decadent version of Latin, right? But then there's also Latin as Latin itself being utilized as a language of communication, as a lingua franca. But even that
Mm,
version of Latin localizes, right? So you end up, as you
mm,
said, you end up with insular Latin, which is the style of Latin that was being used and in which it was being written in what's now Ireland, right? And then there's the
yeah.
style of vernacular of Latin that was then being utilized in France, or in what we now call France, or what we now call Germany,
Mm,
or what we now call Spain. And all of those different versions of Latin can be basically identified to these respective regions because of their differences and their distinctions.
mm,
And in some cases, like,
yeah.
they just wholesale start utilizing words from the actual vernacular language in Latin. So you end up with, old Irish words being sort of back translated into Latin if it's for a concept that Latin cannot rightly cover. So I think that is
Mhm.
actually a very valid way to look at some of these works, these the literature, the manuscripts, and say, well, yes, there were probably, no doubt, people from various parts of Europe working on them, but in doing so, they utilized a local style to apply it, and that style we could then refer to as, in this case, Irish. So I
Yeah.
think I think that is a valid way to try to ascertain the cultural associations or origins or influences in these various works. Yeah.
Yeah, just to quickly, I'll quickly go through the questions here. I just want to quickly answer this one. For wasn't there a Celtic counting system preserved by sheep herds, or am I speaking? You want to look at the book by Fergus Kelly's Early Irish Law and his farming book as well. It's somewhere around the house. I apologize for this. I just came back, but look up Fergus Kelly's Early Irish Law and also Fergus Kelly's Early Irish Farming. And that will give you the answer. It'll give you the laws on it. And then in Early Irish Farming, it'll explain how the counting system works. I'm not sure. I don't think there's any books covering the system going between the coinage system of the cow, what was it, the silver, and then converting it over to the cattle system as well. I don't think there's any books covering that one. But the answer you're looking for there is definitely covered in Fergus Kelly's Early Irish Law and also Early Irish Farming. Somebody also was saying as well, is this the new episode of Father Ted? Man, I miss Father Ted. That was such a good show. Father Ted hasn't been out since 1995. I was like, what? Is it that old already?
Yeah.
Rachel, did you watch Father
Yeah, I
Ted?
did. We used to watch it on Maryland Public Television when I was growing up.
Oh,
Yeah,
really? No,
yeah, yeah,
brilliant. I miss Father Ted so
yeah.
much.
So
It was absolutely
so
amazing.
funny.
I think we could do a good job of pursuing what was it, Father Ted and stuff. But anyway, regardless, I'll get back on track. Is the Book of Invasions a good read? The Book of Invasions is absolutely amazing. What's the Book of Invasions part of? Give me a quick look there, because the Book of Invasions is basically. I remember when John Kerry was explaining the Book of Invasions, and the Book of Invasions is basically the Laura Gahara. That's the book, Laura Gahara. It has the Book of Invasions in it, and it's an absolutely gorgeous and beautiful book, and definitely worth reading it for sure. But I remember Professor John Kerry was explaining. I have his book around here as well somewhere, right, somewhere in the house. Anyway, at the apartment. But actually, here it is. I think he's got the Book of Invasions in this, or his notes on the Book of Invasions, which is John Carey's A Celtic Heroic Age. Absolutely must have book. If you're into Celtic literature in Ireland and Wales, this is the book to get. And he talks about other influences within the wider Celtic world as well. But anyway, I'm sure in this he covers the Book of Invasions in this, and the Book of Invasions is basically, as Professor John Kerry was explaining it one day, the Irish had read the Bible around the 5th century, and they suddenly realised that they weren't in the Bible, and so the Irish were quite disappointed. So they went off and writ their own version of the Bible called the Book of Invasions, where it starts off with them hanging around with Moses and suddenly cutting ties with Moses and wandering through Africa, making their way up to the Iberian Peninsula. And then from the Iberian Peninsula, where they're referred to as the Scoti, and then from the Iberian Peninsula over to Ireland. And then even Robert the Bruce, then he quotes from the Book of Invasions in the 14th century when justifying him getting involved with Irish politics against the English, with Robert the Bruce and Edward the Bruce's invasion of Ireland around 1314, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. But in it, he quotes from the Book of Invasions. And basically, as I was saying earlier, it basically says that the Scottish and the Irish are basically the same Scotty people that go back to Moses
Right.
at the very start, which is quoting from the Book of Invasions. Absolutely amazing book. If you want to see the foundations and basically the idea of who the Irish identified themselves as during the medieval period, Book of Invasions is a book to get for sure and to read. And it's a really fun and really, really great read. So I definitely would advise definitely to read the Laura Gehara, the Book of Invasions, for sure.
Yeah, this is actually a brilliant question in general, because people often ask us, me especially, and I think you as well, how do we know history? how do we know what history is, right? What are the sources for history? And works like the Book of Invasions are one of the ways in which we can get an idea about history, except that, as I've mentioned recently, medieval chronicles, pre-modern chronicles today, all chronicles are clickbait. And so you have to understand the context in which these works were created. Like, who was the target audience? Who was the patron? Why were they written?
Yeah.
The second you start talking about Moses and being descended from the great warrior Aeneas, or being descended from the great warrior Brutus, or what you have there is an attempt to create a mythical, legendary connection with a powerful and famous past that may or may not have ever existed. You can't really trust that that's true history, and that anything that comes after is questionable in terms of its veracity, which is why we also have to rely on archaeology, right? We have to rely on the archaeology to tell us, well, was there really a battle there? Is there any evidence of that? Were there actually people who were 9 feet tall living in ancient Ireland? Some of those chronicles talk about these giants, right? So, yes, these chronicles are great, but I always like to read them with a grain of salt. Never take it at face value.
Yeah. Finger looping. I've never seen finger looping before, says one person in the comment section. Explain, Rachel, what's finger looping and what are you doing?
I knew we were going to get there eventually. Right. So modernly we call this finger loop braiding, and that is because, I think I just messed up. Okay.
Oh, no.
Damn it. That's because I actually have loops of yarn or thread on my fingers. And then I weave them in a different pattern, braid them basically with my fingers to create laces, or in some cases you can create trim, really beautiful, fancy trim that you can use on the neckline of your garments, men and women. There's actually an extant pair of pants, of trousers from the 10th century from Sjödehem, which some of you might pronounce as Skodaheim in Sweden. And they're men's trousers, and they have a whole lot of finger loop braiding decorating all of the edges, the bottom cuffs, the opening, the slit that's made so that the foot can actually get through these relatively tight trousers. And I think there's a matching tunic as well it was found on the same body that also has finger loop braiding. So this is a style of ornamental narrowwear that was utilized and worn by both men and women. And it dates back at least to the 4th century BC. We actually have extant finger loop braids from Austria, from Hallstatt, a salt mine in Hallstatt that dates to the 4th century BC. How crazy is that?
That is wild, all right. Should we drink every single time a person asks what Rachel is doing?
Yeah.
I think, Rachel, you already came up with a game
Yes,
earlier. What was
yes,
the
that
St.
is. Those
Patrick's Day
are
of the game going?
those are indeed the standard drinking rules. Yes, the standard drinking rules are basically every time someone asks if I'm Amish, take a shot of the beverage of your choice. Every time someone asks what I'm doing, take a shot. Every time someone asks if I'm real, take a shot. Yeah.
Wild.
Jim asks, is it like embroidery? No, embroidery is created with needle and thread or yarn, whereas finger loop braiding does not have any needle involvement. And also, embroidery is done directly, created directly onto fabric, whereas the finger loop braids are created completely independent of any fabric, and then you can apply it later. So it's finger loop braiding is really closer to weaving than is definitely much more like weaving than it is embroidery. Good question though. Yeah, bingo cards. I definitely we need to come up with a medieval buzz bingo card, Philip.
Oh,
And
yeah.
everyone can
That sounds
play
fun,
along.
actually. Somebody asked as well, what made you move to South Korea? But I have a question actually. Do people in South Korea, did they refer to it as just Korea, Republic of Korea, or South Korea? How do you guys talk? Because in Ireland, it's kind of funny there, and I'll just explain it straight while you're thinking of your answer. In Ireland, a lot of people in the north call my side, all of my side of Ireland, the south of Ireland, which always really annoys me because I am the only person actually who is a southern southerner because I'm from Munster. So I'm actually from the tippity top,
Right,
tippity bottom of Ireland. But you have people from what is now identified today legally as Northern Ireland, which is a part of the United Kingdom. My part is not part of the United Kingdom. And so people from Britain always refer to all of Ireland that's outside of Britain as Southern
right,
Ireland. And it always bloody annoys me because Dublin is not Southern Ireland. What was it? Connacht is not Southern Ireland. Galway, not Southern Ireland. Those are different parts of Ireland.
right.
So it's always strange to me. Like if allegedly, according to both Donald Trump and what was it this week with St. Patrick's Day parade, everyone's pushing for unified Ireland and stuff by 2030. Hopefully, anyway, fingers crossed, everything goes peacefully. We'll see what happens there. But regardless, I do wonder when Ireland is unified, are they still going to be considered Dublin as Southern? Are they still going to call Connacht Southern?
Right.
So I'm just curious on your side of things. What do they refer to themselves in your part of Korea? Do they call themselves Southern Koreans? Do they call themselves Republican
Right.
Koreans? Or just regular Koreans?
So there's a difference between how the North Koreans refer to everything and the South
Oh, right.
Koreans. So from the South Korean perspective, in Korean, the formal name is Daehanminguk, which literally means like the Republic of Korea. And has the actual sense of republic, not the corrupted People's Republic,
Yeah.
right? But when they are speaking English casually, no one says South Korea; they just say Korea, right? It's just Korea. Now, if they talk about North Korea, then they say North Korea. And so basically Koreans look at South Korea as the true Korea, and they look at North Korea as this kind of rebel holdout that needs to get its shit together and get rid of the kind of corrupt government they have and actually then reunify. There are lots of Koreans who really want reunification. They want to be one with the North again. There's some people living who still have relatives from the Korean War who ended up on the wrong side of the DMZ. Right?
Yeah.
That population is rapidly declining, but still. So yeah, Koreans view themselves as Korean, not as South Korean. The only time you really see South Korea is in news articles that want to make it very clear that this is South Korea, not North Korea. But that's a publication kind of rule. That's not how most people actually view themselves. So South Korea or North Korea, on the other hand, they are fun. They view themselves as the heirs of the Joseon dynasty. So they actually call themselves Joseon. And and they refer to Korea as Bukjoseon, which means Nam Joseon, which means South Joseon,
Mm.
and they are therefore Book Joseon, North Joseon. So that's I only learned that a couple of years ago watching K dramas, and I thought that was funny as hell that they
Mm.
arrogantly view themselves as the heirs of the Joseon. And by they, it's not all the people. The average North Korean does not view themselves or their country in this manner, right? I'm
Mm.
talking the Kim family, right? They view
Yeah.
themselves, the Red Pharaoh views himself as the rightful heir of the Yi clan of the Joseon dynasty, which is funny because they're Kims, they're not Yis. And the clan that was the
Mm.
Joseon dynasty were the Yi clan. So
Yeah.
they literally can't be the heirs to the Joseon dynasty because they're a completely different clan. So they're a completely different
Yeah.
dynasty by the rules of dynastic, accession. So it is really funny. It's very interesting.
Man, I love learning about Asian history. It's so absolutely fascinating. And like it was, what was it, 2 weeks ago when I got into the history that was happening in Taiwan and stuff. I suddenly like clicked in how close the Asian world is connected
Yeah.
into Europe, especially with the rise of Turk. I didn't realize the Turks were so much involved into Chinese history. I just thought the Turks just wandered around the nomadic areas and then settled down around the Seljuk territories in what is modern day Turkey. I didn't realize that for a good chunk of the early medieval period, going into the high Middle Ages, that the Turks had invaded and actually penetrated into China itself and were massively involved with Beijing
Yeah.
politics. I never knew that. I thought the only nomads that had actually penetrated into China were actually the Mongolians,
Mm-mm.
and that the Mongolians were the only people that had a proper West-East unification. I wouldn't say unification, but a confederation and link of the Silk Road going fully through. And it's funny as well how the Chinese, myself and the wife Yuki, don't fully understand it yet. But it's funny to us how the Chinese have two faces when it comes down to the Silk Road, how they have their Beijing administration face in Beijing, obviously. And then they have their nomadic face the moment they leave the walls of China,
Yeah.
and they start to act more like a warlord trying to unify and control the Silk Road itself. I thought that was so fascinating, and it was a new face to China I'd never seen before until I had gotten into the history and the study of Taiwan history alone.
Well, we in the West, you and I, you were
Mm.
educated in Ireland. I was educated in the United
Yeah,
States. We barely cover Asian history. I
yeah.
mean, it's like a hint of Asian history. I learned very little about Asian history beyond World War One and Two.
Mm.
Until I moved to Korea, right? Living in Korea
Yeah.
is what really gave me the opportunity to explore history here in so much more depth. And as you say, it's
Mm.
so fascinating also how differently history unfolded here, how differently human civilization unfolded here on the eastern side of the continent, because Eurasia is actually one continent. They're not two separate continents.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
it's really fascinating how differently things unfolded here. And like you say, the more I learned, the more I realized, holy cow, China's so much more multicultural historically
Mm. Yeah.
than I ever realized. Yeah, the influence of the
Yes.
Seljuk Turks, right? It's hard to look at Turks now in Turkey and
Mm.
imagine
Yeah.
that they once were nomads riding on the steppes, right? They've
Yeah.
over the centuries, as they kept moving further and further west, they kept marrying local women, and so their phenotype changed, right? They lost, for the most part, they no longer have almond shaped eyes, right? Their skin is relatively pale. Their hair, they have much wider range of eye colors than they probably originally did. But hypothetically,
Mm.
they're still the same. Those are the people who once rode horses and lived in yurts, you know.
Yeah. Jim says, I always felt like I learned more about world history in social studies class. Yeah, I definitely would agree with that as well. The problem I
Yeah.
have with school standard history is it's exactly just a tick in a
Yeah.
box. I have a massive, and that is definitely not how you should learn history. History should be more of a discussion
Yeah.
that should expand out rather than, in 1875, George Washington crossed the road. That's pretty much it. Then you're ticking a box. There's never, like, once you get up to
Yeah.
university standard, then it kind of expands out, and it's kind of like, okay, so why did he cross the road? What proof do we have that he did cross the road? If he didn't cross the road, then who crossed the road for him? That's the university standard. But school standard, geez, it's diabolical. It's literally just like 1825, George Washington crossed the road. Oof, there's your full marks, 100% for
Right.
you. Well done for you for memorizing. So yeah, I fully agree with Jim there. Social studies, you definitely learn way more than school standard, and even academic university standards. I think everybody has the same problems with it as well,
Right.
where it gives a false illusion that you're having a full blown conversation when really you're, once again, you have an academic. He's got to correct 1,000
Yeah.
papers. He tells you exactly what he wants. Well, gives you huge hints during his lecture what he wants, and then when he's correcting the paper, he's only scanning for the correct
Yep.
answer. Bam, bam, bam. There's your correct answer. Poof, 100% for you. So once again, it turns into a memorizing exercise rather than an actual discussion,
Right.
which is something, by the way, every single student really messes up in their first 3 to 4 years inside of university, because it's after the 4 years, because then the academic actually has time to actually read your work, then it turns into somewhat of a discussion,
Right.
you know?
Right. Yeah. I also think, in the American school system for certain, there isn't enough time, right? There isn't enough
Yeah.
time to actually have these discussions because so much priority is given, especially these days, on STEM, right?
Mm,
The liberal arts are considered not unprofitable, right? This
yeah.
is the level to which we have decayed as a civilization, right?
Oh, we're
The,
dark age
the
for sure.
liberal arts, the thing that allows us to be creative and to engage in STEM, right, in a
Mm,
productive, innovative way, that's not profitable. So we're not going to focus much time and effort on that. Instead, we're going to focus all our energy on higher level of mathematics, engineering, science, etc. Right? We're not going to really devote any time or attention or assign any importance to the study of history. So,
mm,
we're and then of course, God knows, in the American public education system, it's just gotten so bad because they've diverted so much money from most public schools that teachers are paid nothing. They are paid a
yeah.
poverty wage, and and
Mm,
and the school districts, all they care about, most school systems, all they care about is passing a standardized test with a high score, because their federal
yeah.
funding is tied to their standardized test score. So if their students perform badly on these standardized tests, then they don't get all the money they might actually need to function as a school. So
Mm,
all they do now in many public schools across the US is teach for a test. Teach for a test, teach for
yeah.
a test. It's not about education. It's not about learning. It's not about knowledge. It's about passing a
Mm,
test. That's just sad.
yeah. Yeah, ticking the box. It's like no wonder we're turning into this robotic dark age.
Yeah,
The Terminator movies. We're turning into the Terminator
we are.
movies. That's the problem.
We are. We are.
Yeah. What was it called? Somebody had a great question actually. I guess it just a theory. If Europeans had intermarried with more of the Native Americans, would their children then have more respect for the land? Kind of more of your question because it's outside of my
I
field
mean,
of expertise when it
that's
comes down to the Native Americans and stuff. And I'm assuming when you're saying Europeans, you're talking more about kind of more of the English people who are part of more of an English centralized system when they come into, or a French centralized system when they come over to Europe.
right.
Um, because when America's set up, it's basically just copying the French and English systems, isn't it?
I mean, the American colonial system. So, this. Okay, so first off, there's an idea of what we call the noble savage, that all
Mm,
Native Americans, all First Peoples have had, historically always had, this profound and abiding respect for the land and the environment. And that is not true. It's not true.
mm,
There are, just like in Europe and Asia, there were peoples in the Americas who had deep respect for the land and had a
mm.
spiritual connection to it. And there are peoples who didn't, who
Okay.
abused it, who committed environmental atrocities, right? So I think you can't just off the get go, you can't just say, well, um, you know, they would have had respect for the land if they had just married this amorphous, unified, um, uh, monolithic group, the Native Americans, right? There is no monolithic group, the Native Americans. There were many different groups, many different civilizations, all with their own different ethos and their own beliefs. There's
Mm.
not just one. So I don't think so. I don't think it would have mattered the culture into which they had intermarried. It also would have mattered the degree to which that intermarriage was actually allowed to culturally backflow
Mm.
on onto the European side. The reality is that European colonists, especially by the 18th century, had were starting to develop a sense of manifest destiny, right?
Mm.
Which means they viewed their culture as being superior,
Yeah.
and I don't think it would have mattered. I don't think it would have mattered. I think what would have happened if more Europeans had intermarried into the first peoples with the first peoples, it just would have meant the first peoples would have become more European
Yeah.
ultimately. Maybe not in the first generation. I'm not talking about the spouse that joins, that is of that marriage, but their children. I don't think they would have been allowed to be raised in that manner,
Mm.
because you have to also remember that's tied in with a horrible version of Christianity, right?
Mm.
A very arrogant version of Christianity, that viewed itself as being the supreme belief, and that, anything associated with sort of a first people way of life would have been viewed in an almost through an anti-Christian lens, right? There were the
Mm.
outliers,
Mm.
right? There definitely were European colonists, or ultimately Americans, who viewed it all differently, who
Yeah.
didn't have that arrogant chauvinistic view of their own culture, who recognized the values in other cultures, for example, the cultures of various first people groups. But would that have been the majority? I don't think so. And especially not once you hit the Industrial Revolution. Forget it. The
Yeah.
Industrial Revolution unleashes greed at a whole new it enables greed at a whole new level. And
Mm.
that trumped any kind of ethics or any kind of morality of any civilization, including Christianity. So
Yeah.
no, I don't think so. I don't think it would have made a difference. But
Uh,
this is pure speculation, right? It's pure speculation. That's not how history
yeah,
went.
it is. It is. And as the comment section points out there, God, it is. It is very, very complicated because we do have examples of colonies that did intermarried, as the comment
Yep.
section is pointing out there,
Yep.
and we also have what was it called? Examples of people who, just like the Irish, who take on the refugee status or coming
Yep.
into America, escaping a debt itself, quite literally. Like I have members of my own family in the 19th century who would have escaped around the Sligo region, what was it called? Rachel's favorite area of
Yeah.
Ireland,
Right.
and
Sligo.
made their way.
Sligo.
Stop it! Stop it! What was it called? Would have escaped Sligo and made their way over to Chicago. So I have what was it called? People I'm related to up around the Sligo, New York area, up around there. As well, and they didn't escape Sligo trying to say, "Oh, I'm going to colonize." No, they had no
Yeah.
food. They actually quite literally had to
Yeah.
get up and leave over to America to look for any way of survival at that
Yeah.
point. Even the boats that they had were known as grave and tombstone
Yeah.
boats because people were
Those
passing
ships
away
were
on the
horrible.
boats. Yeah,
My family came over on those boats. My Irish family did. We actually
yeah,
found uh, the passenger manifests. So we
yeah.
actually saw my Irish ancestors' signatures on those passenger manifests, and that they survived that journey is
Mm.
absolutely astounding.
Yeah. Oh, wild. And somebody early on referred to it as the potato famine. And as this, in this year now, and somebody else just did it there as well, it's actually not referred to academically anymore as the potato famine
Yeah.
because it wasn't the potato famine that killed the majority of the Irish. The British physically took the food away from the
Yep.
Irish. And when the Irish tried to fish or tried to hunt on their own land, the British shot them. So the British were
Yep.
preventing them from getting food. So now academically, in academic books, is now referred to as the Great Hunger. So it's
Yep.
actually academically incorrect to refer to as a potato famine, because that's not what killed the Irish. The Irish
Right.
weren't fleeing a potato famine. They were quite literally being starved to death in their own land. So they were trying to escape onto boats.
Yep.
Landlords who had any bit of empathy whatsoever would actually pay for them to make their way over to America, either through empathy or they just wanted them off the land. It was actually easier to get them off the
Yeah.
land rather than wait for them to go,
It's true.
wait for them to starve.
I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of people don't
Uh,
realize that. I mean, so the potato famine was an actual thing, but it affected all of Europe. All of
yeah.
Europe was impacted by the potato famine. But
Mm,
everywhere else in Europe, the governments made better choices that
mm,
actually supported their people. They didn't intentionally starve them. So the potato famine
yeah.
did not result in the massive die off everywhere in
Mm,
Europe the way it did in
yeah.
Ireland, because, yeah, the British government, Jesus Christ. I mean, and they even punished. I mean, there were local English officials in Ireland who were trying to do the right thing, and they would
Yes.
punish them. They would
Yes.
punish
Yes.
them.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
was absolutely ridiculous,
Oh,
disgusting.
absolutely. There was landlords in Kilkenny sold their property and house and everything to try to feed their own people, because some of these landlords had been living there since the medieval period. So there was a proper connection between
Right.
themselves and their own people. And so when they seen them running out of food and stuff, they actually sold their own house. And some of them ended up falling. By default, they wanted to get more grants out of England. Refused. The English government.
Right.
The English government at the time, the prime minister at the time,
Peel.
said this was an act of God.
Yeah,
Literally said this was an act of
he
God. The
did.
Irish had this. They deserved this. It was an act of God, which really highlights the fact. And what's crazy is there's still people that deny any of this
Oh
happened,
yeah.
which is absolute insanity to deny that the Great Hunger had happened during this period.
It's
As Jim
probably
points
it's
out,
probably like a 1-to-1 Venn diagram between Holocaust deniers and Great Starvation
oh, yeah,
deniers. Like
yeah.
they're probably the
Oh,
same people.
Oh, absolutely disgusting, to be quite honest with you. And as Jim O'Neill pops up as well, coffin ships. Yeah, people were forced onto coffin ships. And when I say forced,
Yep.
because they were trying to flee to get themselves food, or had been, born off the land. And their own country, their own land.
Yeah.
Absolute insanity.
Yep.
In total, 3 million Irish starved on their own land. Three
Yep.
million. I've seen once. I was in a field with 300 people. That was a lot of people. 3 million people, or I think it was a population of 8 million people at the time in the 19th century, which, to a lot of people may not seem a lot. But you have to remember, look at the size of Ireland, the population
Yep.
being 8 million, and then having a large chunk of that 8 million start to starve while they're trying to flee and escape. I
Yep.
had one family that escaped over to Chicago. Another side of my family that still stayed in Ireland were forced to eat grass. They were forced to
Yeah. Ugh.
eat grass, and as a luxury, it was called nettle soup. Nettle soup was considered a luxury. I remember sitting on my grandmother's lap and her talking about what her grandmother had went through to try to survive.
I mean,
Um,
people were boiling leather shoes. I mean,
yeah,
leather is not just like animal skin that you just dry. It's tanned.
mm,
It undergoes a pretty violent chemical process. And for you to then cook that leather until it's soft enough to eat and to
mm,
risk eating all of those, Jesus, I mean, God,
yeah.
God.
Yeah, there's still records missing today. Yeah, so you could be right. There could be more than 3 million people. But even the
Yeah,
fact that people are denying that ever happened, I
it
get
never
people in the
happened.
comment section that deny it, and it's absolutely disgusting, to be quite honest with you. Somebody pointed out that Native Americans were trying to raise money to send to Ireland. Yes, you're actually right. There were Native
Yep,
Americans
there were.
over in the United States at the time were trying their best to try to raise money to send
Yep,
over to Ireland to try to say, and they did. They successfully saved lives up around Middleton, where my wife had actually spent her childhood. And if you type in the Middleton Monument, the Native American Middleton Monument, there's a huge monument today as a
yep,
huge thank you, and a lot of Native
it is.
Americans were actually invited over to Middleton, where
Yep,
my wife grew up. That's also where Jameson's whiskey is from. So if you're into Jameson's whiskey, That's actually where it's from as well. In Middleton, so it's definitely a huge tourist. There's a lot. It's a small, tiny village. You don't really see much. You got the was the Jameson's distillery, and then you've got the Middleton Monument. But there's a load of Americans every year trying to break their ass to try to get out to see the monument and also to see the Jameson's distillery as well.
Right.
So if you're into that kind of stuff, I definitely would say, oh, and you can get a hold of some Butler's chocolate as well. I remember when I was doing tourism up around Middleton at the time, the Americans absolutely loved Butler's chocolate. Obviously, you've got the famous Butler's family up around Kilkenny, and I think it's one of the branches of the Butler family. She spent her money. It was actually a woman. I can't remember. I apologize for this. I think it was Eleanor Butler. Around the 1920s, she set up her own chocolate company with her father's money, and it became Butler's Chocolate. If I remember, somebody in the comment section will probably correct me on that one. But she was quite successful in that one. I don't think it's owned under the Butler's family today, if anybody's wondering. I think it's an Irish American company or somebody who owns it. But then somebody else was saying that most of the companies in Ireland now are owned by like Germans.
Yeah, I mean,
and,
there's
Canadians and
like
stuff.
4 companies in the world that basically own everything, actually.
Yeah. Oh,
No, I'm serious. You should go and look at the conglomerates and the way there's actually very few independent companies left. It's kind of alarming.
mm,
Anyway, there's some good
oh,
comments here. My favorite parts of history are the little moments of kindness like that, referring to the
yeah.
Choctaw's donation attempt to help the Irish. Yeah, so something, if it bleeds, it leads, right? So the problem with a lot of
mm,
study of history is that we focus on the worst moments, actually. Right? I mean,
yeah.
here we're talking about the Great Starvation. This isn't a happy moment, right? We talk about the battles, we talk about the Holocaust, we talk about the genocides. But the
Mm,
reality is that those are all just sort of like the headline moments. But in between those episodes of, granted, horror, there are normal
mm,
people living their lives and being kind to each other and supporting each other. Everyone imagines the Middle Ages was just this lawless time where if a woman left her home, she would be violated horribly and tossed in a ditch, right? But that wasn't true.
yeah.
That just wasn't true. That
Mm,
wasn't the daily experience. On the whole, as I've studied history, I've come to the conclusion that people tend towards good, but that
yeah.
there are some really bad actors who manage to amass enough power to do bad. But for the
Mm.
most part, we just want to help each other, right?
Yes, 100%. I was just actually talking about that with the wife yesterday, how you have a period in time we refer to as the Golden Age of Ireland, which actually they had to bring in laws to prevent Irish women from going cattle raiding. Now, the fact that they actually had to bring in laws to prevent women from taking part in cattle raiding shows that Irish women were getting involved with cattle
Right,
raiding, right?
right,
So that shows that during the Golden Age of Ireland, in the 6th and 7th century, that Ireland was safe enough for women to leave their clan area and just explore and wander out and get
right.
involved with cat raiding, get involved with basic life around Ireland. But sadly, by the time we get up to the 9th century and the Viking Age, there's no laws being trying to enforce to force women, to stay away from cattle raiding or getting involved or anything like that. Why? Because Dublin becomes the biggest slave market in Western Europe. And the
Right.
majority of that is women who are kidnapped. We also have laws that are being enforced at the time by the, what was it, Clonmacnoise's administration, which is the ENL Confederation, forcing laws that enforce men to protect their own women, that if a woman leaves their clan area, that a man has to
Mhm.
accompany them at all times. Why? Because they were being physically taken by Vikings and sold,
Yeah.
which I'm, by the way, I'm not saying Vikings as in Scandinavian. I just mean pirates as a whole. That
Yeah.
includes the Gaul Gael, the Irish Vikings as well. Irish people were physically taking
Yeah.
other Irish women and selling them in Dublin, Waterford, Cork. Okay, so you're perfectly right. There's periods where women are very safe in our history, and then there's periods like this where women are not as safe as they used to be back in the 80s.
Yeah. Right. Periods. I love
Mm.
how you say periods like this, as in now.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm not
It's
even
true.
joking about that.
It's
Like,
no.
yeah, what's happening to
I'm.
women right now is
I'm.
disgusting.
I'm laughing acerbically. I am not laughing
Yeah.
in humor. It is true. It is very true. I'll just take this moment. If you're enjoying this live stream with Philip from Irish Medieval History and Rachel from The Creative Contessa, then please like and subscribe. If you're watching from my channel, The Creative Contessa, please check out Irish Medieval History and make sure to subscribe there. And of course, selfishly vice versa. But we hope you all are enjoying. So thank you for joining us for our Medieval Buzz, where we just sort of meander through topics of importance to history and of course respond to your comments and questions while doing our respective medievalist activities. Yeah. So were there any good questions in the comments that we need, or comments that we needed to address?
One towards myself as well. I was reading about the customs in Virginia. Apparently, after every Irish marriage, they would have a horse race or a bottle of whiskey, and that was in Virginia to do with the Irish marriages. I'm not sure about that one, but there is a link between that and the, what was it called, Irish medieval history as well, where horse racing was a part of celebration of marriage as well. There's a few actual sources of that. I can't remember the other. Give us a second there, but there is Irish myths and sagas. Give us a second there. That one. Yes, I have here actually. Early Irish Myths and Sagas by Penguin Classics, which has all the original sources from the early medieval period that talks about Irish horse racing and the original kind of Irish saga stories, the mythology stories around Irish horse racing. So if you're looking for the source for that one, definitely give that a look. I don't specialize in modern history, to be quite honest with you. Most of my stuff is mostly medieval history, and I think that's the same with yourself as well, Rachel, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I mean, I have probably a more profound knowledge of medieval history than the average person, but certainly not than the average historian who's actually specializes in modern history. Yeah. Let me see. Do I do dry stone walling? No.
Yeah, you're looking for someone to wall over for your house later, yeah? I need some dry stone walling done. I'll pay you $250 for it. No, I'm grand.
No.
I myself and Rachel don't actually specialize in house building there. You'll have to find someone else for that one. I don't think there's anybody even in our group that specializes in house building. Do you know anyone that specializes in house building, Rachel?
I mean, who does drywall? I mean, I'm confident I know some people who are professional drywallers, but that's not the bond that connects us, so we don't talk about that aspect of their lives. Oh my gosh.
What was it? I love medieval art where the animals have human faces. Yeah.
So those are called grotesques in the art history circles, and they're fun. They're super fun illuminations like that. Sometimes they're actually making political points because the human face might be the face of the Pope or the local king or someone else who's kind of a hot button topic at the time that the illuminator is doing the art. But those kinds of grotesques also prove just how imaginative medieval artists were, right? They're not just copying things they see in their lives unless there are cats with human faces wandering around. So, I also love those little marginalia. And the marginalia, you all, if you look at a medieval manuscript, you have to look in the margins, because in the margins are where you're going to find all this crazy fun artwork. Some of it is so naughty, so very, very naughty. Like a man bent over, squatting, poking through his own legs with a horn stuck between his butt cheeks, very clearly using his nether air to blow the horn.
Oh yes, I remember that one. Yeah. Wild stuff.
Yep.
What was it called? I like to visit Ireland again. I had the chance to visit Ireland back in 2000 up around Shannon. Did you go and visit Bunratty Castle? I actually did living history up in Bunratty Castle as well. I didn't do living history back in 2000 though, so I probably didn't see you. But did you see the living history? They were living reenactors up in Bunratty Castle. And also, was it Bunratty Castle you went to see? Because if it was up around Shannon, I assume that you're talking about Bunratty Castle that was owned by the O'Briens. The O'Briens actually dominated up around that region during the medieval period, up around the 15th century. Rachel is actually quite knowledgeable for the clothing up around there because that's very close to where they found the my gown,
Yeah.
wasn't it? The my
The
gown
Moy
dress
gown.
is up
Yeah, the Moy gown.
my
Yep. The Moy gown.
that's
Yeah.
up around that region.
It's very interesting. Everyone wants. Oh, poo! I just did something very weird. Well, I'll fix it in post. Anyway, uh, everyone everyone wants to imagine that the medieval Irish, in quotes, because as you and I have discussed, there's different kinds of Irish in medieval Ireland. But they
Yeah.
want to imagine that this amorphous group of people called the Irish, all
Mm.
dressed so differently from everyone else, right? They're not wearing anything like anything that people in England are wearing or Europe are wearing, and they've got their own completely unique fashions. And the extant garment evidence does not speak to that at all before the
Mm.
16th century. So, what we see in the garments that have been excavated is that we see very similar lines to the garments that
Yeah.
people are wearing in England and in France and in Italy. We see very similar tailoring techniques. We see similar stitches. We see,
Mm.
we see a lot of similarities, which isn't to say they're an exact copy. There's certainly some local flair, but it isn't the kind of flair that people want it to be, right? Like they
Mm.
want women running around in men and women running around in mini skirts, basically. They want especially they want bare-breasted women, I think is what a lot of people imagine. They think about medieval Irish women just wandering around naked, I guess. Um, they want them wearing clothes that have all kinds of crazy embroidery all over them. They want them in bright yellow and in what is now called a tartan or a plaid, right? But
Yeah.
that's just not where the actual extant evidence of the archaeology, nor of the text sources. That's not where it takes us. So,
Yeah.
we're you and I are in the midst of this project, right? This exploration of 15th century Irish clothing, and
Yes, we are.
the goal is to get Philip in kit, everyone, to get him in kit, and a kit that would be appropriately time period to the ones I generally wear, right? War of the Roses, Ireland, basically. And so in that research, what we're finding is, that the Irish liked fashion too, and that they wanted
Mm.
full garments, and they wanted fur, and they wanted neat hats, and they wanted cool sleeves. But it wasn't necessarily this rebellion against Irish fashions that people really want to think it was.
Yeah. I'm just doing 1,000 things at once there
Yeah.
because you guys in the comment section are sending me some good references. What was it called? What the bloody hell did it go? When is the done cow? I'm just wondering there because one of you guys over in my comment section were pointing out that a good source for clothing is
Dunleavy?
in the story.
Is it Dun?
Yeah, Hostel, and it's in the book, the Dun Cow. Because I actually just looked it up there. When did that bloody book come out? The Dun Cow. I keep getting modern translations from the because I know it's a medieval
Yeah.
book. I've got the
Right.
Lauren Duhon. That's 1106. We're mostly focused on right now, 15th century, but 1106 is a good one actually. And you're saying there that it has good examples in the comment section. You guys are saying that it's a good example of description of
Right.
clothing. So from the 12 was it 1106? That's during the period of Murtagh Ibrahim,
Yeah.
but I'm sure that's actually around the southern Enel territory. What's going on at the time? That's pretty much in the center of Ireland, isn't it? I'll have to look at that book. That'd be an interesting reference for
But
sure.
not for
And
15th century clothing. So guys,
mm,
you can't. Fashions change. in the Middle Ages,
Yeah.
in Ireland as well. So the way people are dressing, the kinds of fabrics to which they have access in the early 12th century is not going to be anything like what they're wearing in the 15th century. So yes, I
Mm.
appreciate that reference, but it's not going to inform the 15th century in the least, nor should it. Right?
Yeah. That's very
There's a
true.
big shift. There's a big shift in European clothing going from the 10th to, or the, yeah, from the 10th to the 12th century, but from the 11th to the 12th century, even in Scandinavia, on the continent, there's a big shift. There's a shift away from trousers, actually, for
Mm.
men, to separate hosen that they actually attach to their underoos, their breeches, their brays, their breeches, as they're called in like 13th century English. And that's a big change. They're no longer joined, they're separate, but they're more flexible. So, you know,
Mm.
there's big shifts everywhere in Europe at that time. So we can't really use it. If it's from the 12th century, it's not useful for 15th century fashion. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
But there's also issues with translation, which we have discovered, haven't we, Philip?
Yeah.
Do you remember saffron? Do you remember saffron from that old French story translated into it about the old French that was actually the old French translation of an Irish story that then was translated into Old French, and then the Old French got translated into English. And
Yeah.
remember, you came to me and said, look, here's evidence of saffron being
Yeah.
used to dye yellow. And I went and looked at the Old French, and I'm like, there is not a single mention of saffron here.
Yeah. The
Not a
problem
one.
is that people were trying to force in, because they
Yeah,
imagine 15th century clothing, well, 16th century clothing from the Tudor era, and
yeah,
that being the standard Irish clothing, people were then
right,
trying to force in their, what was it called, nationalist ideas of this is a uniform for the Irish,
right.
and then trying to enforce it then into, this is the Celtic Irish uniform, trying to get that from the 16th century and then enforce it into the what was it, the 11th century. You see
Yeah,
the same thing with kind of the Celtic tartan clothing as well. Like,
yeah,
this clothing here is from the Latin period, and people then imagine, even this idea of the naked, savage, Celtic, Irish people
yeah,
in the 15th century running around naked, covered in tattoos,
yeah.
when that's not the case at all. Like, the work we're doing, 15th century Irish ensemble over on, was it
Hmm.
GoFundMe? If you go check that out over on Google, you can see that myself and Rachel are trying to raise funds to do more research into what the Irish were wearing at the time during the 15th century. So it's definitely worth funding into our research, because so far we haven't found any clothing from the 16th century Tudor period, which a lot of people assume that's how the Irish were
Yeah.
dressing in the 15th century, especially the early 15th century. We haven't found any indications of that so far in the
Mm-mm.
research and what people have funded into that. Obviously, we need more money for the research, and also our end goal of trying to construct that clothing from the 15th century,
Yeah.
especially for myself, all of which Rachel will document. But also, we haven't found any indication of them dressing naked like the Celtic people during the Latin period. And we also haven't found any indications of them dressing like the 12th century. Rachel, you really into 15th century. How were the Irish dressing during the 15th century? Because I'm not finding any evidence of them dressing like the 16th century or the 11th century,
No.
or even
Yeah.
like ancient Celtic people.
Yeah. It's,
Mhm.
and this is where I'm this I come at this with no personal agenda. I
Yeah.
don't. Yes, I have a large chunk of Irish blood flowing through my veins. The my the Some of the stories of my great great grandfather involve the consumption of rather a large amount of alcohol. But
Mm,
anyway, I don't have a dog in this fight. So I'm not
mm,
looking to push a nationalist narrative of
yeah.
this is how the Irish were. They weren't English. They were their own people, right? So I've been coming at this from a pretty clean slate of one, knowing nothing, like having no preconceptions about clothing in Ireland through any period of the Middle Ages.
Mm,
So I've been letting the evidence take me where the evidence takes me, right?
mm,
With
mm, mm,
no preconceptions. And even though I had seen a bunch of those 16th century plates depicting woodcuts, engravings, etc., depicting Irish people in their native dress, I assumed that those weren't going to be reflective of the 15th century because fashions change. So
Mm.
what we have found is that, the extant garments that we have that could possibly date to the 15th century, but may also date to the 14th century, or may also date to the 17th century. So what we're finding is a lot of information that isn't as clear as we would like, first off.
Yeah.
So the extant garments, the moi gown that you're talking about, it's this garment, we call it the moi gown. We assume it had more originally. What is survived only goes to about the knees, but the rest is rotted away. So you can tell there was more. So we assume it was a woman's dress.
Okay.
Also from the shaping, because it actually has like breasts. The way it's put together, it's going to have curvature for mammary glands. Mm-hmm. So, that garment looks a lot. I mean, like so much like French and English garments, women's garments from the 14th century. It also looks exactly like the dresses, the coats, COTE, in which Noah's wife and daughters are depicted in the Ballymote Bible, which dates to roughly 1403, right? So it seems very likely that this garment that hasn't been dated because archaeology in Ireland is not well funded, I guess. So it hasn't actually been dated, but it looks so much like all these garments, all these depictions of women in this garment from the 14th or the early 15th century that it seems likely that it's a 15th century garment. So for a woman, that's going to be a garment that's fitted in the body like this one. The sleeves have only survived down to about here, but it's very clear there was more sleeve at some point. And it's got these deep arm's eyes. So the arm's eye is the place, the seam around your armpit, right? That's called the arm's eye. And this thing has super deep arm's eye. It's very sophisticated. It cuts all the way here into her chest and comes kind of down here deeply. And then it cuts really deeply into the back and around the shoulder blades, sort of following the line of the shoulder blades, which makes sense for how you move, right? And this exact same, what's called in French, a grande assiette, a big, deep arm's eye. That exact same arm's eye is being used in France in the 14th century, especially on men's garments, so that the men have complete range of motion despite the garment being fitted to their body like a second skin. So it is such a sophisticated arm's eye, Philip. And here it's excavated from a bog, right? It just shows that 14th or 15th century Irish garments are sophisticated. They've got a really profound idea about how to take a two-dimensional shape and make it not only fit a three-dimensional shape, but allow the wearer to have full range of motion while still being a fitted garment. So the other thing this garment shows is what we always know about material in this era. Medieval fabric is super expensive. It's really expensive. So it's many of the pieces have been put together not necessarily for a practical purpose of creating movement or shaping, but because they just wanted to use every single last bit of the fabric. So some of the pieces were stitched together just to make a bigger panel, for instance. So it shows both sophistication of tailoring techniques and also conservation of resources, indicating that the wearer was not someone who is super wealthy, right? Necessarily. But I say that, and yet the coat that belonged to Count Charles de Blois, the Count of Blois in France, dating to about the 1360s. So he was a count. He was a regnant count. So he had his own lands. He had his own territories. He was a warrior count. And his coat is made out of a beautiful silk lampa. So it's like a silk brocade with lions on it. It's gorgeous. And even though he was a count, he was wealthy. He had rents and income and all the things to support a nice lifestyle. Even his garment is pieced together to maximize the use of the fabric and minimize the waste of the fabric. So there are pieces that have been sewn together just to make the panel wider, to make sure that nothing was wasted. So,
Mm.
so I say that, well, the Moy gown is clearly someone who was on the lower end of the economic spectrum because they couldn't afford to just cut, willy nilly. And yet, in
Mm.
the 1360s in France, we have examples of the aristocrats making absolute every use they can of their expensive fabrics. So,
Yeah.
so far it looks like the garments are fitted in the body, and then
Yeah.
we have the sleeve. We have this, and actually, as well as I do that
Sligo.
in Middle Irish, it's not Sligo, right? There was a vowel shift
Mm.
into modern Irish. It's actually Sligo in Middle Irish. Anyway,
Yeah.
uh, anyway, the Sligo ensemble. Again, we don't know to when it dates. It could date to the
Mm.
14th century. It could date to the 15th century. It could date to the 17th century. It's not been dated,
Mm. Mm. Mm.
but it happens
Okay.
to look exactly like the Irish bard in the Scotichronicon from 1440.
Mm.
It looks exactly like it. It looks exactly like that outfit. Oh, Absolute Maniac! Thank you so
Oh, thank you so
much.
much.
I'll get to that. I'll get to that question in a moment. Absolute Maniac! What would the cost of a dowry be for the Irish lass? We'll get to that in a moment. So it looks exactly like that Irish bard depicted kneeling before Alexander III in the 1440
Mm.
illuminated Scotichronicon. So
Yeah.
it just seems so likely that therefore this garment probably is in fact a 15th century Irish garment. And again,
Mm.
it's actually fitted in the waist very nicely, and then it flares into this nice full skirt that are open in the front from
Mm.
about mid thigh down, and it's got these beautifully fitted sleeves with buttons going all the way up the back of the arm to here, right on both sleeves. So
Mm.
the sleeves are fitted, but they're cut in a way. It doesn't have that deep arm's eye, but they're cut in a way that there's a bend cut into the sleeve so that the fabric isn't straight, and then when you bend your arm, your elbow pokes through eventually. It gives you range of motion to be able to comfortably bend your arm in both directions while still having a fitted sleeve. So again, sophisticated tailoring. So,
Mm. Mm. Mm.
but it's not yellow. It's not it's not the main garment isn't plaid. It doesn't have a plaid pattern at all. But what does have a plaid pattern, which will make you happy, I know, his trews. The
Mm.
man had trews,
Oh.
right? And he had trews, which is definitely something different than what most people were wearing in Europe at the time. So
Mm.
if
Mm.
this garment in fact dates to the mid 15th century, which maybe it does, no one's dated it, so who
Thank
knows?
God.
But
Like,
maybe it does. But his trews, which are basically footed trousers, imagine
mm.
imagine imagine like footed pajamas like some of us wore when we were growing up, right? But just the lower part of the pajamas. So it's footed. They have feet sewn into them. They're footed.
Mm.
They look like chausses that go actually all the way up to the thigh in a bias cut checked fabric. So what we call a plaid now. And
Mm.
it is yellow. It does have yellow. It has yellow and brown. And then that pretty, really nice, beautiful bias cut wool actually comes to a
Mm.
point at the thigh, and then it's sewn into linen breeches, basically linen boxer
Mm.
short like things. And then those are held up at the waist, I think, by a drawstring. So
Okay.
that seems likely to be a good rendition showing us what Irishmen were probably wearing in Ireland in the 15th century. And that also ties in with this chronicle from the end of the 14th century, Jean Creton writing about Richard II coming to Dublin, right, to knight the four great kings of Ireland and get their submission, their homage, right? The
Mm.
man who is sent to civilize them for the knighting ceremony has all of these very stylish English court garments made up for them, lined in
Mm.
fur, rich fabrics, and he has brays made for them, breca,
Yeah.
breeches, and they're made of linen.
Mm.
And he talks about having to teach the kings to wear these. So it
Yeah.
seems likely that maybe putting all of this together, that the Gaelic Irish in the 15th century, end of the 14th into the 15th century, were maybe not automatically wearing linen underpants, basically. Like
Okay.
they were wearing a different style of they were wearing maybe these trews, right, where the hosen are built into this linen breech-like thing, which would not have been the court fashion at the end of the 14th century in England. They would have been wearing nice fine white linen breeches, brays, and then they would have had these really, really nicely made, nicely tailored fitted hosen that would come up and would point to their coat, would point to the garment, not to their undergarment. So yeah. Okay, question about dowry. I actually have no concept of dowries in medieval Ireland. Do you have any knowledge about dowries in medieval Ireland?
Let me hang off the thing here. Oh. There we go. Right, the book. I actually found it magically when you started throwing money at me.
Magically.
What was it called? The book you're after is A Guide to Early Irish Law by Fergus Kelly. There it is, right there. It's a bit blurry, right? But that diaries and all that stuff during the early medieval period. This is the book to get. They'll cover diaries, how much a man or a woman would be during a marriage. Let me see.
And actually, so here's the question. So this is for early Irish history. So that covers laws up till about what point? What time? What's the time frame of the laws covered in that book?
This is covered from around the 6th to the 8th century. And
Right.
then these laws start to first get bastardized around the Viking Age. So from around the 9th to the 11th century, they start to get bastardized. So you need to be switched on to what's happening in the city areas. This is the foundation to pretty much all of it. And you do actually have Irish lawyers that try to enforce to the best of ability after 793 with the start of the Viking Age, the Brehon laws into Ireland, because they see it, if the Brehon laws aren't being enforced, then Ireland is in all anarchy, okay? Ireland is in chaos, right? Like the English, it's funny because a lot of people that come into my chat, they're just like, well, the Irish were savages. They didn't know any better. But actually, from the Irish perspective, it's the English and the foreigners that are the savages. They don't understand our laws. They need to be educated with our laws. If we were following these laws better, Ireland wouldn't be in such anarchy. And there's actually laws still in place today that originate back to early Irish law. They work perfectly fine even today. They're actually still enforced in Ireland today. But they're bastardized, and they start to get bastardized in the coming with the Vikings. Another very good example is once we get into the High Middle Ages, you don't really have the Brehon laws, the Tuat system in Ireland. It's more like bastard feudalism, where every lord in Ireland is pretty much their own king. There's no real high king. And then they would have pretty much the early stages of an Irish government, an Irish parliament. And that starts when they switch from giving cattle tribute to a high king to start giving a gift to a fellow lord. So, one of the earliest ones is the O'Briens would gift the O'Neills with horses instead of a cattle tribute, because the O'Briens, they seen themselves as kings and the O'Neills seen themselves as kings as well. So because they seen themselves as equal footing, but wanted to recognize the Irish Confederacy against the English, they would give themselves gifts instead. Gift-giving culture started to really boom going into the 13th century. Rachel could easily talk for ages about gift-giving culture, but it's quite interesting how that kind of rubs off in Ireland as well. But that bastardization of the laws even continue into the late medieval period. Rachel's talked about this before with colours, how now, back in the early medieval period, black was considered a very low class color. But by the time we get into the late medieval and Renaissance, black starts to really pick itself up.
It becomes the luxury color of par excellence, of choice. And you and I discussed that. And my theory is that when the Brehon laws were first written in the 7th century, that they were basically, or 6th century, that they were talking about natural black, by which I mean wool that comes from black or brown sheep, right? And so absolutely, I could see how that would be the cheapest wool you could want, because nothing is done to it. It's not bleached, it's not dyed, right? But then when you're getting into the 14th and the 15th century, true black is coming into fashion, and true black is a very expensive multi-stage process because you have to first dye your fabric red, and then you have to over dye it with a blue, and then you have to add oak gall and iron into the dye bath so that you really trigger that full deep black. It's very expensive and it's very laborious to make a good black. So there is no way that black is still considered the color of the poor by the 15th century in Ireland. It's just, it's not
Yeah,
possible.
for sure. I petition. This is a super chat as well for yourself, Rachel. Where one of your followers are saying, "I petition, return the Brehon laws, bring back the High Kings of Ireland, and have them bring in the spirit of the Great Oak of Tara." I definitely 100% agree with you from there. I absolutely love early medieval Ireland, especially with the old Enel Confederation, a
Yeah.
whole load of Irish warlords going off to raid into Britain and France and was it modern day Spain, the Iberian Peninsula. Bring it back, I say, definitely for sure. But on saying that, I do like the late medieval period as well, the late medieval period and Renaissance when we have the Irish Parliament, which is the foundations. Because it was, what was it called? Around the Irish Parliament starts to get onto its own feet and starts to go away from the High Kingship in Ireland, the kind of the kings of Ireland and stuff around King John's wars, both in Ireland and in England with the the Baron Wars, isn't it,
Right.
Rachel?
Yeah.
Where they end up fighting for the in England it's called the Magna
Magna Carta.
Carta,
Yeah.
and in what was it, Ireland, it's either called the Irish Magna Carta, but it also has another name that I should know because I thought about this. What was it, a few weeks ago? Magna Carta. Bum, bum, bum. But yeah, I actually kind of like the drama in the Irish Parliament as well. Like one of my favorite scenes, and I've talked about this before with you, is back in 1403 when the Seamus Fitzgerald, James Fitzgerald, the usurper, goes into the Irish Parliament and announces that he is actually Italian. It's one of my favorite
Ha.
points in Irish
Right.
history.
It's pretty fantastic. I'm just going to rewrite my entire genetic code. I am
Yeah,
I am now Italian. We are of Italian descent. We are descended from the Caesars, in fact, you know.
yeah.
Oh my
Like
god.
you imagine, people imagine like, oh, well, the Irish clans and the Irish Parliament, they just spent all their time fighting amongst. They spent most of the time saying the most wildest stuff ever. Like if you sit down and actually read what they say to each other, they just turn around and say, "Oh, well, I'm Italian, you know that, lads," and you'd be like, "Huh? What?" Like, and
Oh,
go on.
but we never actually got to the question of the dowry. So, how much would a dowry actually be? Like, you know, I guess dowry. So, I'm wondering if there even were dowries in the first millennium in
There
Ireland,
is, yeah,
because dowries are the basically a payment by the bride's family to the groom's family because she's viewed as being an economic burden. But
yeah,
in the first millennium, women, in for the most part across Europe, women are viewed as being an economic benefit, an economic
yeah.
good, an addition to the household. They're viewed as being economic contributors. They're viewed as being, you know, the creators of the next generation, which has value in and of itself. They're viewed as being a productive member of the economy. And so you actually have bride prices in most
Mm.
places in first millennium Europe where grooms actually have to pay to get a bride. Also because the Justinian plague has killed like 60% of Europe. So there's not as many women as there were available before. So is it a dowry or a bride price that is stipulated?
You see, you're pointing out very, very interesting things that does change over time. I'm quickly scanning through this now, but it's in this book. I know that for sure because we have to cover this in what was it called, university as well. I'm sure it's a diary though because it's the clan that has to pay to look after members of their own kin. So if I
Mm.
join your clan, my clan originally has to pay to look after me. So cattle, so you take good care of me. That's the way they
Uh,
would have looked at it. So if because you also have fosterage in Ireland as well, and it's up to your
mhm.
own kin group to look after you, well, the clan anyway. So they would have given cattle and various other bits and bobs. But if there's a divorce, you have to then pay that back to the original clan. So, for example, if she goes back to her clan, her dowry goes back with her. So that stays with her. That is there to
Mm,
pay for and look after her.
right.
So it's not. Don't look at it as a kind of thing of trying to. Oh, I'm trying to get rid of her. Here's some money. Go get lost. It's a case of, oh, please look after my daughter. Here's cattle, and here is what was it? Cattle, honey, and various other bits and bobs to look after her because she's very valuable to me and my clan. That's the way that they would have looked at it. So it is considered. It is. I have heard the term dowry price. With the actual woman herself. So she is identified with cattle to look after her. And it's the same thing with the foster children that go to a different clan,
Mm,
kin group, is the fact that they have cattle and what was it, honey and various other resources, even clothing that goes with them to look after them when they're
right.
inside the group as well. And there's also laws as well inside of this that says, hey, look, you can't do A, B, and C. You can punish her. So if she's really being bold and stuff, you can punish her, but you can't do things like punch her in the face. If you punch her in the face, that's a divorce.
Right.
So there is certain punishments you can do to your wife, but you can't just outright punch her in the face, for example. That's like the worst thing you can do in Irish society because that ruins her face to the rest of the society. When I say face, by the way, I mean the way
Honor,
society,
dignity, right?
that's the
Yeah.
one. It ruins
Yeah.
it for the rest of the society. So you
Right.
do things like punch her in the arm or something that people don't see in the wider society. Yeah, that's you just scalding your wife, right? Which is seen as acceptable to a certain degree. But you can't just outright get your fist and punch her on the nose. If you leave a scar like that, that's an instant divorce, because
Right.
you're ruining, as you said there, her honor price. That's ruined because of that. But that's all covered in the book Early Irish Law, A Guide to Early Irish Law by Fergus Kelly. 100% would definitely advise that one for sure, where it covers all that sort of stuff from the diary. But also keep in mind that that's just when this is written, as Rachel has pointed
Mm.
out as well. That changes over time, especially when we go into the Viking Age, where people are just outright kidnapping women to be their
Yeah.
wives, which is also covered to a certain degree in A Guide to Early Irish Law, but changes with the Viking Age, and then changes again with the Norman invasion and the English invasions, and so on and so forth.
Right. So there's a good question here. Could you elaborate on the domestic value seen in women back then? Well, first off, back then is 1,000 years.
Mm,
So the way women are viewed, the way women are treated varies across the 1,000 years that is the Middle Ages. It also varies from geography to geography, from region to region. So there are very few sweeping blanket statements that can be made about medieval Europe, right? That for the
mm,
whole period that is the Middle
yeah.
Ages. So we really should be looking at it more in terms of specific places. So I can tell you, for instance, that in the Anglo first sort of early England, we'll call it. So we're talking like the 9th through the 10th through the 11th century. There
Mm.
were laws on the books that if a woman was injured, you had to pay.
Oh, well, that's the end of Rachel. uh,
Oops, lost connection. Okay, am I
oh,
back?
she's back again. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Am
back
I back?
again.
I'm
Yeah, yeah,
back.
yeah, yeah.
Great. Okay.
God.
Right. So there are the laws on these books, from early England, and even from the kingdoms before that, from Wessex and Essex, and the old Anglia, the old kingdoms, right?
Mhm.
That talk about the fines you have to pay if you commit different kinds of crimes,
Mm,
right? And this is how well organized early English society was. It
yeah.
was not a lawless time. It was an extremely regulated time. And so on the books were laws or were fines, basically a register of fines. And I
Mm,
don't remember the exact numbers, but I do know that the relative ratio. So if a man is killed, you have to pay weregeld, which
yeah.
means literally human money for
Mm,
having done something to a person. And
mm,
that weregeld for a woman was significantly higher than for the same rank of man. You had to pay way more money if you killed a woman because she was viewed as being a economically more valuable component of society, because
mm,
not only was she able to contribute to the household by helping weave and make fabric and spin and cook and take care of all of these very essential parts of of medieval economic production, she could
Mm.
make babies. She could make the next generation, which could then also become an economic benefit to the household by helping the household survive, giving it a better chance of thriving because more hands makes light work. That's especially important in a pre-industrial or an in-between industrial society, because
Mm.
Rome was definitely an industrial society.
Mm.
Um, so, but that changes as the population of women across Europe, and this happens across Europe, this isn't just England, this changes as the population rebounds from the Justinian plague, right? And as the population rebounds and you start getting more and more women, it's like, supply and demand.
Mm.
There's fewer women, women are more valuable. There's more women, women are therefore less valuable. And so by the time you're getting into the 12th century, you're seeing a real shift away from bride prices to dowries. And
Mm.
so it seems that women are playing a decreasing role in economic, at least they're perceived as playing a decreasing role in the generation of economic value,
Mm.
right? So, but that's not true everywhere. There are, different places in medieval Europe had different relationships with their women and different valuations of their women and of the rest of the society. Yeah.
I for sure. I have a few questions there, and it's gone out the window. There's some weird English laws that are still in place today. I heard that if you go up
Yeah.
to the, what was it called? Because somebody pointed out there that some of the English medieval laws are still in place in England today. There's a funny one. Somebody made a YouTube video that you're not allowed to wear full plate armor when going up to the capital in London.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, police do not take seriously, because there's somebody who actually went to the main capital in London in his full plate armor, and the police were just like, "Oh, very nice," they don't enforce it, and it's just like, completely oblivious. Now, if you were to
Yeah.
rock
Right.
up with an assault rifle, your days are done because you're under terrorist acts. So please don't rock up with an assault rifle just because
Right.
you're not wearing your full plate armor. You know,
Right. I mean,
they'll ignore you. Go on.
there are some crazy, they're absolutely weird. All those laws, like it seems that in England they very rarely repeal any of these old laws. They just kind of get forgotten in the archives, rolled up in some 600-year-old, parchment scroll, literally. And so there's, do you remember the case of those idiot, I think they were either Cambridge or Oxford students
Oh,
who
no.
decided they found this law that said that you are required to practice longbow archery on the green every Sunday,
Oh God.
right? It's a requirement, and it dates to the 15th century, I think. It
Yeah.
might date to earlier, but to at least the 15th century. And so they went like the jackasses they were. They thought it would be a lark to go
Mm.
and do this, right? To go into down. I don't remember if it was Oxford or Cambridge, but it was one of those two. They went to the green and they brought longbows. I don't know where the hell they got them from, and they were shooting archery
Mm.
longbows on the green, and they got arrested,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Of
of course.
course.
Mhm.
and they actually used that as their defense. They said, "Look, we're actually the lawful ones.
Mm.
Everyone else is breaking the law. You should be fining literally everyone else all the men. You should literally be fining all the men between, I don't remember the age. The law said that if you're between the ages of something and something, you should be
Yeah,
practicing
like
longbow."
14 to
Right.
65 or something. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that, right? And the judge knew what these little scamps were up to, and so he went and looked at the original law,
Mm.
and he found that there was a stipulation there that you
Mm.
couldn't do that until you had attended mass. Like first you had to attend mass, and then you were to go practice archery. And
Mm.
guess what those little scamps didn't do?
Didn't go
They
to
didn't
mass.
go to mass. They did not go to
Oh
mass. No,
no.
no.
Oh,
So they got fined for not attending mass
good,
before going and practicing with the
good.
longbow.
Can you still just run around England today with a longbow? I think you can, but I think they're trying to bring in more anti-terrorist laws when it comes down to running around with
Yeah.
swords and longbows. Because I remember Matt Easton was getting angry because people were getting arrested for running around with swords. And I remember a lot of Americans were getting annoyed for that because England doesn't even have the right to run around with a gun. I know in Ireland it's always in a very, very, very funny grey space when it comes down to farmers trying to defend their land,
Right.
which I do believe in Ireland. But my family is very pro guns, and we do believe that we should have the right to defend our own land, especially somebody who's trying to break into a bloody house. But regardless, when it comes down to England, I it's because so many people run around stabbing each other. I'm just like, maybe the English shouldn't have, sharp knives. Maybe no sharp objects.
Well, I mean, so here's the thing I know from living in Korea.
Mm,
Guns are so tightly regulated here. It is so hard to get a gun. Thank goodness.
yeah,
But people will people. There
yeah,
are, for the most part, people are good, but there are miscreants amongst us, and there are also people who are suffering from mental health issues, right?
mm,
And so the weapon of choice here for an attack is a knife,
yeah.
right? So Korea actually, and a chef's knife no less. So Korea actually has some is increasingly strict about the laws about having a knife on your person out
Mm,
in a public space. And the other thing that people use here instead of guns, vehicles. There's
yes, yeah,
vehicles are used as a murder weapon here,
mm,
and also big sticks.
yeah,
So granted, it is much harder to kill 155 people in 5 minutes with a knife
mm,
than it is with a rifle with bump stock on it. So I'll take the knife over the gun action, honestly.
yeah. For sure.
Yeah,
Guns are legal in the UK, yeah, but they're not
yeah,
legal like you would see in other countries and stuff. You
yeah,
need certain stipulations behind
yeah.
having, like farmers, there's no problems there because they have it for shooting and stuff. And I had a friend who had a rifle for hunting, so there's certain like people in the city don't run around with guns the way they would do in Texas. And I know they're not running around like it's a first person shooter, but you do have the First Amendment in the Texas region, isn't it? You know way more than I do, Rachel. Why
The
am I trying
First
to piece this
Amendment.
down together?
The First
Yeah,
Amendment is the freedom to assembly and freedom of speech. The
yeah.
Second
There you go.
Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Second
They
Amendment
have that
is is
amendment
is
thing,
is the
Rachel,
Second
explain there.
Amendment. Yeah, the Second Amendment is the one that says, the state, in order to maintain a well-regulated militia, or the state, in order to maintain a well-regulated militia, Congress shall not abridge the right to bear arms, or should not infringe upon the right to bear arms. But until very recently, that was not interpreted as allowing people to have whatever kind of firearm they wanted, and was interpreted as part of part of a functioning, well-regulated militia. And then the Heller case in 2010 at the Supreme Court, that was completely funded by the gun lobby, overruled that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and people forget the whole part about the well-regulated militia. But also, Tom McCord, do you really have an AR, like an AR-15 in your fridge? Why is it in your fridge?
Who's got an
Also,
AR in their
how
fridge? What
how
the?
can it fit in your fridge? Do you just not have food in your fridge? You take all the shelves out?
I'm going to put gun in fridge. All right, fair enough. What was it called? God, yeah, we have to be careful what goes on in the United Kingdom. People are getting arrested left, right, and centre. I don't even know where the line is. Up in the Northern Ireland, they keep just giving warnings. I'm just like, I dare them to arrest somebody in Northern Ireland for breaking. What was it? What laws are they breaking? By the way, it's all terrorism. If you say anything that goes against the government right now, you're considered a terrorist. And they just have you been seeing this, Rachel? How
Oh
they're
yeah,
arresting people? Yeah, it's
yeah, yeah,
insane.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
they
yeah.
tried to arrest what was it called? Irish nationalists. The police knocked at their door and gave them a warning. And the videos on YouTube, and as they're trying to warn this Irish nationalist, behind him he's slowly being circled by a whole load of other Irish nationalists in Northern Ireland. And your man's just recording there, going, "Oh yeah, so what are you going to do about it?" Well, for the time being, we will give you a warning, and then he leaves. And I'm just like, I would have loved if they tried to arrest him in the middle of a centre of an Irish nationalist area in Northern Ireland. Yeah, the British police have gone wacky tobacco right now with their freedom of speeches and stuff. I don't know what's going on over there.
Yeah, we live in terrible times. I'll just put it that way.
What about Irish medieval painting? If you actually jump onto my Patreon on
Oof.
Sunday, I'll be talking about Irish paintings and stuff. During the High Middle Ages, we don't have any surviving paintings and stuff because of this thing called the British. Back to bitching about the
Because
British.
of this person called Cromwell. That
Yeah,
and oh God, I just
and your day.
the iconoclasm by the Protestants was it makes me so angry, so angry.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. But we do have surviving effigies from the 13th
They do.
century, which I will be talking about on Sunday over my Patreon. So if you want me to waffle on about Irish effigies, definitely head on over to my talk on the Sunday. But from my research so far, we haven't any surviving paintings, which is funny because we have everything else. We have everything else. We just don't have any paintings. We do have the Celtic knots and the old Celtic drawings and stuff from what was it? The likes of the Book of the Duncow and stuff, which you guys were just
Yeah,
talking about there. So they
the
are
Book of
surviving,
Kells.
but
Yeah,
they're not as they don't have the same drawings that you see in the 10th century and stuff. So we're mostly, when it comes down to drawings of people and stuff, I'm mostly looking at effigies from that period, and some of the descriptions and stuff you guys are giving me there as well, which is super handy. And obviously all the research that Rachel's been doing, but you're mostly
yeah.
looking at descriptions and effigies as well, aren't you,
Oh no, I'm
Rachel?
looking. I'm looking at the manuscripts too. So I have actually found there aren't. This is so there seems to, for whatever reason, the Book of Kells is this gorgeously illuminated manuscript. It's got
Mm,
so much visual detail and embellishment. People all over the place in garments, beautiful, giant illuminated capitals. But there is a shift, and I need to talk to an Irish expert in medieval calligraphy and illumination on this.
mm,
There's a shift that happens between the first millennium and the second millennium, where decreasingly our Irish, and I mean manuscripts that are written in Irish, right? So
mm.
really Irish, hard Irish, they're no longer illuminated, or they're
Uh-huh.
minimally illuminated. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's because there was some kind of, ascetic view of illumination and embellishment as being unnecessary to the book, if they couldn't afford to illuminate them, because the materials for illumination are crazy expensive, right? Those
Mm.
pigments are not cheap.
Yeah.
Ink is not cheap. The materials to actually make those beautiful marginal paintings are super expensive. I don't know if it was a decrease in skill set. I don't know if it's just that all of the beautifully illuminated books of our Irish manuscripts are now in private collections, sequestered throughout the world, right? Like that's an option too.
Yeah.
Or if they just all burnt up in
Mm.
Dublin in 1921,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like I don't, so I haven't, it's very frustrating because everywhere else, and I mean everywhere else in Europe, you have this amazing tradition of illuminated manuscripts with beautiful pages just depicting an entire battle, or depicting a courtly love scene, or depicting people dancing, or depicting people feasting. But we just
Mhm.
don't have that equivalent tradition of illuminated manuscripts in the same period in Ireland. Like, you talk about illuminated manuscripts. If you do a search for medieval illuminated Irish manuscript, 95% of the time it's going to give you the Book of Kells,
Yes.
like as though there's nothing else. So I have been looking through the digitized archives of Irish manuscripts, and I have found occasionally a person depicted, and I am incorporating that into the research as well. But
Yes.
very often the quality, the caliber, or always,
Mm.
none of the quality is anywhere. It's like, please don't take this personally. It's like the person who is doing the illumination on the Irish manuscript was a kindergartner, and the
Yeah.
people doing, say, the French manuscripts were postdoctoral masters
Uh-huh.
of the art.
Mm.
That's the level of quality. It's the Irish manuscripts from the 14th and 15th century have such crude drawings in them. it's shocking. Even the Ballymote Bible, if you look at the illumination, that illuminated page from the Ballymote Bible depicting Noah and his family in the ship,
Mm.
if it weren't for the clothing, I would never look at that and say, yeah, that's an early 15th century illuminated miniature. No, more
Mm.
like an 11th century. Like
Yeah.
that's the caliber is just so very different. And I've been curious as to why, and I don't know why. I don't have an answer for that.
Mm.
So the answer is there actually are, and you might want to look through some manuscripts yourself to add to your medieval Irish art
Because I
awareness.
know, have you looked at the Book of the Bergs? The Book of the Bergs that comes out in 1571. I know it's much more later on.
Oh yeah, I
Uh,
mean that's yeah, but that's like post medieval man.
yeah, it is. That's the
That's
problem.
that's early
Because
modern.
that's the only one I can think of that starts to bring up the standard a wee bit.
Yeah,
But the
yeah,
14th, 15th century, that's so strange,
it
especially
is.
when we're starting to bring in golden fabrics and stuff, and there is massive economics. Like this is after the gold, Gaelic
Oh,
resurgence.
sorry, the Waterford rolls. Right, the
Yeah.
Waterford rolls are like one of the few exceptions to this rule. But
Mm.
the Waterford rolls with that depict the mayors of Limerick, Cork, Waterford, and Dublin, right? The four big cities, right?
Yeah.
That is an amazingly, I mean, God, it's stunning. It's like one of the few examples of Irish medieval illuminated work that isn't the Book of Kells.
I think the problem, though, is that Owen O'Neill was talking about it as well. Is the fact that Gaelic Ireland at this point has become very rural countryside and is not as
Right,
developed as the port areas. Now, the
right,
problem is like the O'Briens would be the exception to that because the O'Briens control Limerick and they also control Balranty Castle and stuff. And that's where the Moygown and stuff is found, is in O'Brien territory. But the thing is the O'Briens are part of the Anglo-Irish world at that point. Oh, they're Gaelic. They are Gaelic. I just want to make that clear. But they are part of the city world of the Anglo-Irish world at that point.
right,
But the O'Neills, and Dr. O'Neill had talked about that as well. There's points where the O'Neills are considered very backwards because they're way out there in the countryside. They're way up there in the north of Ireland, and there's no connection to any major ports for the likes of
right,
the O'Neills and the O'Donnells and the O'Connors, who did, they have a huge part of their culture as manuscripts compared to the southeastern areas, which don't have the same Gaelic manuscripts, and would have done, the roles and stuff, and would have followed more of the trends of France and England. But at the same
right.
time, like, why aren't they producing the standard of France and England? Like, what the hell is
It's
going on there?
it's so weird. It does so. I mean, I guess I get the rural argument. I mean that makes
Mm.
sense. You do really need to have well organized cities to first to produce a leisure, the
Yeah.
ability to be able to focus nothing, all of your energies as an artist on mastering this art, because illuminated art, even though it's like the redheaded stepchild of the art world, is just as complicated and just as sophisticated as panel art or canvas
Mm.
art, right? So you really need to be able to train and get professional training, by the way, to attain that level of mastery, to be able to depict the human figure realistically, to know how to do shading and gradation of colors and all of that. So I could see that it being more rural outside of the cities, that might lead to an issue with being able to actually train that level of artist. But then
Mm.
why then does the Book of Kells, the Book of Kells comes out of a monastery, which is on one hand very rural, I guess, but on the other hand, a monastery is
Sorry,
actually
what did
like
you
a
say?
city. The Book of Kells?
Sorry, say that back. Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry, it
Oh,
was breaking up there. Book of Kells doesn't
oh,
come from Royal Ireland. At the time, it was
right,
first constructed between Ireland and Scotland, which at the time was a part of. It was center of the monastic world at the time,
right.
so it
So
wasn't like
that's
out in the middle of nowhere when it was
right. So I was about
constructed.
to say it was part of a monastic community, which is basically a city
Yeah,
in itself, right? So,
yeah,
but then what
yeah.
about the medieval monastic communities? Why aren't they able to do that same thing? Or are the monasteries in later medieval Ireland so small that they don't have the critical mass to
And
train artists in that way?
I
Yeah,
think that's what's going on for those ones way up in the north. There are ones that are funded by the likes of the O'Briens, the Fitzgeralds, the McCarthy's. Um, I think the problem is it's mostly the the people who are connected. By the way, I want a quick jab. I don't like the term Anglo-Irish, by the way, and it's mostly because of your research that I'm more and more not liking the
Yeah.
term Anglo-Irish. I think I prefer the word Irish European, to be honest with you, just because they're more connected to the wider European world rather than just Anglo-Irish. And
Yeah.
that's the ports of Galway. Like Galway is very much connected to the Iberian world. You also have Limerick, which is connected to France and Spain. You also have, what was it, Limerick, Galway. But my main point overall is most of these areas in the southeast of Ireland is connected to France and, what was it, France, the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, and also to England, right? But a lot of times we look too much into the English world. So I'm not really the biggest fan of the term Anglo-Irish. But regardless, the Irish European world, as I'm going to use right now, um, those
The
monastic,
Euro-Irish.
yeah, you're Irish, right? But the thing is way up in the north, and you guys can easily correct me on this one. A lot of those places aren't as connected as those places in the southeast of the island that are connected to cities. So maybe that's what's going on. Even the monastic churches that are being constructed at the time, like the older ones, like Clonmacnoise and stuff, are pretty much, they're not abandoned. They're still active, but they're not as big as they used to be. But this is what's actually annoying. Maybe this is the answer. The Book of Cashel is missing. The Book of Cashel was constructed around, there would have been a Book of Cashel around the 15th century, and that was burned and destroyed by
Oh,
Henry VIII. Henry VIII
right,
burned that book to the frustration of, what was it, Professor Kevin Murray. Kevin Murray, I remember he
right.
spent a full hour literally losing his cool about this because he's very passionate about Irish manuscripts, but he's a lecturer from the south of Ireland, from Cork. So he lost his nerve one day bitching about Henry VIII because Henry VIII had burned the Cashel manuscripts. And Cashel at the time would have been booming because it was under the control of the O'Briens. The O'Briens were connected to Bramraghy Castle. If you look at Bramraghy Castle in the 15th century, this thing is a huge towering
Right,
castle. It's absolutely magnificent. And Bramraghy Castle was in control of Limerick City at the time. So
right.
Cashel, which is bishops, would have been very dominant. Armagh may have been an interesting one, all right. I'm not sure what status Armagh would have been at the time, especially against Cashel, because Cashel is well funded into the 15th century. So I think that's an interesting thing to investigate. Which one was the dominant monastic church? You also, in Dublin at the time, have two major cathedrals, which is Christ Church and St. Patrick's Cathedral. Maybe they're
Right.
producing manuscripts as well, considered Anglo-Irish manuscripts, which, it's Dublin, it's very much connected into the English world. So I don't
Yeah.
really disagree with the term Anglo-Irish for
Oh, this
Dublin
thinking
manuscripts.
that triggered something as well. So there's also the Trinity Bible from the
Yeah.
15th century, which has some amazing, actually does have some really quality illuminations in it.
Mm.
Um, it's housed at the Trinity Cathedral in Dublin currently.
Okay.
It's pretty amazing. So there are some pieces. So I think you're right. I think it's a question of the books that have survived are the ones that weren't the beautiful, expensive gems, because the beautiful, expensive gems got burnt on
Yeah.
purpose, right? As
Yeah.
a political statement, as a statement of power, and or the beautiful gems were. I really think a lot of them must have been in the archives in Dublin, right?
Mm.
I just I just have this feeling in the pit of my stomach that they went up in smoke in
Mm.
1921. So it's yeah. So maybe it's not so much a question of they weren't being produced. It's just that the ones that survived were the ones that, we'll call them the amateur attempts
Yeah.
at, at illumination, rather than the beautiful masterworks that caught people's eyes. Yeah,
Mm,
so that
mm,
it's
mm.
there. If I were you, I would look at the Waterford rolls to
Yeah.
enhance your discussion of Irish art, late medieval Irish art especially, and the Trinity Bible. Look up the Trinity Bible. It's got some, and in fact, the Trinity Bible is going to help us a lot in
Mm.
our recreation of your 15th century ensemble, because there's actually a depiction of a fool in nothing but Elena. He's
Oh.
wearing just Elena, but it's white. It's white. It's not yellow, but it's Elena.
Mm.
It's a linen undershirt, and he's wearing nothing but that, and I think a pair of boots or
Okay.
some
And
other
he's
kind of
just,
shoe.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
He's not barefoot, no, not running around in the bog.
No, no. He's not wearing anything on his bottom half except for shoes.
Hmm, that's interesting.
I mean, he's a fool, right? He's not supposed to be clever. He's
Mm,
literally a fool. So,
yeah.
yeah. So we just had a question from someone from France. Alex, si tu es déjà là, if you're still there, Alex, Philip and I are, neither of us have a PhD. At least I don't think you do. Do you, Philip? You don't have a
Yes,
PhD.
we do. We both have
Yeah.
plans to push up to our
We have plans.
PhD at some
We have
stage.
plans to pursue our PhDs.
Mm,
So I would. I'm not certain if I'm comfortable calling myself a historian in general. I'm a fashion historian. I have a passion for history, and I love learning and researching. I'm not certain what counts as being a historian in today's world. Philip also studied history at university, like I did, and is also passionate about history and knowledgeable. So neither of
yeah,
us are archaeologists, though. We are not
yeah. That
archaeologists.
would be the wife over there. She's at work right now. My wife
Yeah,
is a solid archaeologist. She worked with Dr. What was it, Professor O'Brien from University College of Cork in various Viking sites. And my wife also worked up in Dublin as well, digging up Viking graves and stuff. So my
right.
wife is a solid archaeologist. She is literally what the definition of an archaeologist is, but she's at work right now doing accountancy.
Yep.
What was it called? Life
Archaeology
after
does not pay
university.
well, everyone.
Yeah.
Archaeology pays garbage. Oh, in fact, did you see that cheeky advertisement Newark
What?
just put out? The city of
No.
Newark in England just
Uh-huh.
put out for archaeologists. They want it's a not the city of Newark. It's they're working in Newark.
Mhm.
What is this pre-construction? It's called pre-construction archaeology,
Yeah.
and they want to pay trained archaeologists £27,000 a year.
Mm.
£27,000 a
Mm.
year as a salary.
Mm.
That's
Yeah, talking about salary, you just got another donation as well of
oh
hey, good for you, man. That's literally his username.
huh.
He doesn't have any questions or anything there. If you have any questions, definitely comment below. And thank you so much. He's subscribed onto your channel
Oh
there,
yeah,
Rachel. Mm.
thank you. Hey, good man. Appreciate you becoming welcome to the community. Make sure to remember to check out all of the extra content that I've posted for my patrons and channel members and my Facebook subscribers. And remember, one of the perks of patronage and channel membership is and Facebook subscription is access to my private Creative Contessa Discord server. I will go ahead and post that link again for my members and patrons, etc. So you can join there. We've shared information and resources all the time. We have really fun discussions. So it's definitely a good place to be if this kind of thing interests you. Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, by the way, hello from Korea. I am also in Korea. I am in Daegu, actually. And yesterday I was in Seoul at the Gugnim Minso Pangmukwan. So I was at the Seoul National Museum yesterday looking at 500-year-old garments. So that was
Mm.
great.
The
Yeah.
Trinity Bible, is that referred to as also as the 15th century biblical text as well? I think it's called Trinity Bible because it's stored in the Trinity
Yeah,
University. Is that it?
it's stored in the Trinity University, and I don't, there's like an official name for it. I don't remember what it is, and I don't remember its manuscript designation offhand. But yeah, it's
Mm,
called the Trinity Bible because it is housed at the Trinity Cathedral, the
yeah,
Cathedral of the Holy Trinity in Dublin is what
yeah.
it's actually called.
Just people looking for it in the comment section went to look it up. I just type in Trinity and then put in 15th century biblical text, and it should pop
Hmm.
up there for you guys. That's
Yeah,
what I and it popped up. Online, it's not great to be looking up. It's very poorly. It is
yeah,
recognizing it, but it's very poor
it is.
information popping up on it. But myself and Rachel, because we're doing the GoFundMe, help recreate a 15th century Irish ensemble. I'll send over the link to you guys there just before we start to finish up, because myself and Rachel have to go and do the bits and bobs for the rest of the day. Because I just came back from Taiwan and I need to put together the presentation for next Sunday, where I will be covering what was it? Switching over from 15th century Ireland. This Sunday, I'll be covering 13th century Ireland, just going into everything that happens just before the Scottish War of Independence, the fighting between the Scottish and the English and how the Irish were involved with all that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in that, definitely head over to my own Patreon and check that out. That link I provided below there is for myself and
Oh, okay. Apparently, Philip, hold on, everyone. Philip, he also recycled. So let me add him back.
oh,
Okay, so you're back.
that's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, you're back. You left off at the next thing's coming up on your Patreon.
Yeah. So basically, I'm be covering everything architecture, art in 15th century, was it 13th century Ireland, and everything that happens just before the Scottish War of Independence. So if you're interested in that, definitely head over to my Patreon at Irish Medieval History and make sure to subscribe. Rachel, what are your plans for this week? What are you up to?
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, yesterday I went to let me start from sort of the beginning. In addition to the research project into 15th century Irish clothing, I'm also in the midst of a major research project on historical Korean fashion from the 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries and
Mm.
how these garments were made. And part of that project is me going to museum collections behind the scenes to the archives and actually examining original garments with my hands and
Mm.
eyes in person. And yesterday, I went to the Seoul National Museum and examined two basically undershirts that belonged to a woman who died 500 years ago. And I learned so many things about how these clothes were constructed that I'm just so excited to share it with you all. So I think tomorrow I will be doing a live stream talking about my findings from that exploration of these women's garments. So if you are interested in hearing about how late medieval, early modern Korean women's garments were constructed, 16th century women's undergarments were constructed. If you have questions about historical Korean fashion, the history of Korean fashion, tune in tomorrow. I will be dishing up all of my new learnings and the excitement that this project is going to unveil. Otherwise, we've got a medieval sewing party this weekend. I also have a Frock Flicks chat scheduled with Mason from King Henry's Royal Court. And then I have my medieval cooking party this weekend where we will be exploring yet some other tasty medieval dish or dishes in the quest to taste the past together and figure out how these things were actually made. So yeah, lots of excitement. And if you want to support my work, you can become a patron on Patreon. I have hundreds of hours of extra footage for my patrons, depending on your level of patronage. We have the Creative Contessa private Discord server, and I post all kinds of extra things all the time for my supporters. There's channel membership on YouTube as well, which also, depending on your level, comes with access to extra footage. In fact, some of that extra footage is going to be my recorded video notes from viewing these garments yesterday. So if you would like to actually see those videos, they're not getting published generally, then consider becoming a patron or a channel member or a YouTube or a Facebook subscriber.
Mm.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
so
what's going
that's.
on there. I do apologize, guys. Some of your donations are not popping up on the main chat. There was a
Are
few
you
more donations.
serious?
Yeah, there was
Oh,
actually a ton of donations and gifts
oh, I
sent
am
over to your
sorry.
channel there, Rachel.
I am so
Um,
sorry, everyone. Sometimes the live chat just doesn't tell us the truth, does it,
yeah.
Philip?
So thank you so much for everybody that
Oh,
sent donations over to Rachel's channel there just before we went off. None of them are getting through. There's a good 3 donations that got sent over just as we're
gosh.
finishing over.
Okay. Well, thank
Not a
you. Thank
single
you for
one.
letting me know, Philip. So
Yeah.
everyone, I mean, Philip and I, we appreciate all of you who can afford to give us your hard-earned money to support us in sharing history. But we also know that not everyone is in those financial
Mhm.
circumstances, right, Philip?
No, well,
So
yeah, pretty much in a pretty
yeah,
terrible place, especially
it's a
after
terrible
coronavirus, I
place.
guess.
So we also appreciate all of you who are part of our community, who participate in an amusing and engaging way in the live chat, who ask good questions, who make funny comments, who follow us, who hit that thumbs up all the time, and are always there whenever we go live. So we appreciate all of your support. whatever form it takes, everyone. We're building a community together, Philip and I,
Yes.
and we're very happy and honored that you've decided to be part of it. Yeah.
100%. And also, another question did not get through on our side again.
Oh,
So I do
goodness.
apologize. Have we written any books and can we purchase those books? Sadly, myself and Rachel, not yet have written a
Not yet.
book. I do plan in the future to write a good few books on history and stuff because there's a lot of stuff I disagree with from the academic side. And Rachel also
Yeah.
disagrees with tons of stuff, even our research to do with 15th century Ireland.
Yeah.
There's tons of stuff she does disagree with. So she does plan in the future. I assume you're planning in the future to write books on this.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean that's kind of the plan. On the other hand, Philip, it's almost not worth it anymore to write a book because with AI starting to write books,
yeah.
why should we even bother?
Yeah.
It's such a frustrating world
Mm,
in which we intellectuals and creators find ourselves. It's terrible.
yes.
It's the worst. I
Yes.
will be publishing a paper on this historical Korean fashion research, and probably once I get my PhD, my dissertation is probably going to end up becoming a book, I
Ooh,
assume.
ooh,
So no,
nice.
no, yet I haven't published any actual books either. So I'm honored that you all think we would be savvy enough to do such a thing. That's actually a pretty good compliment, Philip. I
Mm.
think we should be
All
proud of
right.
ourselves.
Well, hopefully, anyway. Other than that, guys, thank you so much for all the massive support you have given us today and all the donations. It means so much to myself and
It really
Rachel.
does.
Other than
It really
that,
does.
slán go bhfuilige. Thanks very much. Goodbye. See you. Bye.
Stay
Bye.
creative, everyone. Bye.